Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, March 30th, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Assistant Professor of History at Florida State University, author of Stranger Danger, Family Values, Childhood, and the American Carceral State. Paul Renfro will be here today. Also on the program, despite its vow, Russia continues to bomb in the Kyiv area, but negotiations seem to be progressing. Meanwhile, European cities expel Russian officials as Poland ends Russian oil imports. Susan Collins announces she will back Ketanji Brown Jackson for Supreme Court seat. Maserati Joe Manchin, senator from Self-Enrichment, West Virginia, shuts down Biden's wealth tax. Because, of course, he does. CDC, at this very moment, doing its 60-day statutory Title 42 review to determine whether to extend it. Sinema and Kelly call for its extension, and so doesn't Manchin. For some reason. Madison Cawthorn's coke and orgy revelations apparently have gotten him in hot water with his Republican leadership.
Censorship.
Totally. There's one rule about Coke and Orgy Club. Never. Biden signs a federal anti-lynching bill. California has a reparations task force to study the issue of reparations. Come to a report by the end of the year. They vote to limit reparations plan to the direct descendants of slaves or free men in this country, black men or women in this country prior to the 1800s. Trump calls on Putin for release of dirt on Hunter Biden. PJ, please. And there appears to be some progress on a COVID relief bill. All this and more on today's program. We should say that COVID relief bill, we're starting to see numbers pop back up in this country. And I am headed off to get my second booster later this afternoon because I am privileged by my advanced age.
They call it the boomer booster.
The boomer, non-boomer booster. Emma Vigeland is here. Emma, it's time for your catchphrase.
It's hump day.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. She coined it.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Yep, there you go. And I will be getting my
Your
booster.
Boomer boost. Because it's
Not-
like boom or bust. Boomer boost.
Yes, except for I am not a boomer. People who are age 50 are not a boomer.
We don't know.
I'm a little bit more advanced than 50-year-olds. Yeah, there you go. So I'm not going to reveal my age because it's a big secret.
Well, that's why you're.
We can just say I'm over 50.
Right. We can't take your claims.
It's amazing when you look at history.
Yeah. I'm actually closer to 60 than I am 50.
Well, that means you could be a boomer. You could be.
I guess theoretically, yeah. But I'm not. But I'm not a boomer.
Only in
It's just
spirit.
1966, not the year of the boomers. That would be, I mean, the boomer generation are babies that were born in the wake of World War II, when, you know, supposedly people came back, or they're from fighting, or there was a sense that like better days are ahead of us, and so that spurred. But I mean, that a 21-year delay.
I feel like Kennedy assassination kind of could mark. I'd be okay with that marking Gen X.
The start of Gen X?
Yeah, and the end of
Isn't it
boomers.
like 63 or 64?
I don't
It's
know
pretty
what the
close.
official is, but
I'm
yeah.
not sure either. Nevertheless, unimportant for all of our purposes today, except for the edict in which I say that you're not allowed, of course, to say that I'm a boomer. Now, this is consistent with I will say, with critique I have been receiving. I will read
Jeez.
this.
All
This
right.
is from that Substack guy,
Oh, yeah.
Ronald Reagan.
I'm a subscriber to said Substack now, just so
Yeah.
you know. But you can't fire me because I'm saying it publicly.
Yeah, there you go. You get the special provision of, if I said it publicly, I don't get fired by it.
Well, no, I have the protection of the audience.
It's from the Substack Pause It. R.I.P. Freedom of Speech.
I thought we weren't going to say this guy's name on the show anymore.
I don't want to be accused
That
of shadow
guy.
banning him.
As some of you are aware, I prepared an expose of Sam MSDN Seder for
A little
the
clunky.
Majority Report live show in Brooklyn last weekend. He's combined Sam MSNB Seder with also DN Seder.
Yeah.
And so
That's
it's MSDN Cedar. It's sort of amazing that nobody has come up with that
It's
before.
a compact joke, yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
For the Majority Report live show in Brooklyn last weekend, I worked tirelessly on this project, not for fame or fortune, but in pursuit of the truth. The final video was about 8 minutes long. Yeah, it was. In it, Sam Seder reveals his ties to Henry Kissinger, his disdain for the audience, and the truth about who is pulling the strings over at the Majority Report. Unfortunately, just hours before the show, a belligerent Sam Seder contacted me and insisted the video was too long. I told him I was in the middle of a family emergency, and he responded that he didn't care. The video must be edited. It's hard to make cuts when the truth is your northern star. But I was able to get the video down to about 4 minutes. This shows you exactly what liberals think of the First Amendment. In yesterday's Majority Report, Sam claimed the full video would be released. But when? He was short on details. I guess we will have to wait and see when his MSDNC handlers decide to release it, because we know who is really calling the shots over there.
Well, luckily we got an email from Peacock this morning, so we do have a firm date.
That's right.
Yeah.
MSNBC and the DNC have conferred, apparently, and they sent over an email to me with a requirement that on Friday we will play it. We're not, I realize, like, if I say this, everybody's gonna be like, they're definitely doing something. But we're not gonna do we're gonna have a special sort of April Fool's show, but it's not gonna be we're not gonna create something new. Still, I think we're still probably a year out from that. Maybe for Halloween, we'll do something like that. But what we are going to do is we're going to play that Ronald Reagan thing, only because my handlers have said to do it, because it's becoming now apparently a political liability for MSNBC and the DNC.
Mm-hmm.
So we will be playing that on Friday. We will also play another video from this right-wing troll that people are familiar with. It's a short video, but talking about the Boston show. And then we will play a repeat of one of those shows that we did for April Fools way back when, that features Michael. And so That's that.
Yeah. I just have a note on Reagan style there. When you, just to go in with the rest of the cohort of these sort of Substack crew, when you use a word like belligerent, add a phrase like disgustingly belligerent
Yeah.
in front of it, or like the word disdain, say putrid disdain, and then you'll just about have it.
That the use of adjectives is
Hilarious.
but also crucial in
Yes.
making the point.
Everybody understands that to take down DNC cucks, you have to use more adjectives
For the
than
human
normal.
container.
Right, right. To
Yeah.
fill up.
Yeah.
And adverbs as well.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. You got to get really into it. You got to be very flamboyant, as they say. We announced yesterday at the top of the show, headlined, that Pramila Jayapal had been able to secure a hearing from the House Oversight Committee on, I think it's specifically on universal health care. This was taken as an opportunity by the progressives in the House to promote single-payer health care. There is another thing that's going on that John Walker over at the American Prospect has written about. There were expansions of the Affordable Care Act subsidies, which allowed for about an extra 3.5 million people, more or less, to get health insurance who otherwise wouldn't be able to. Walker gave an example, I think, of a 60-year-old woman who is now paying started her own business, paying $93 a month for her health care. When these subsidies sunset, which nobody anticipated they would, because people thought that they were going to do Build Back Better, which included these subsidies, her health insurance will jump to $1,500 a month. And of course, in the just to show you the political brilliance of Democrats, she will get a notice in October when it's time to go into the open enrollment that your cost is going to increase by $1,200 or a month.
What's the month
$1,300.
after October?
That would be November, which is in fact this year when elections are.
You know, they must have just got confused and thought that this was one of the years when elections weren't in November.
It just, for those people who think that Democrats do this on purpose, just walk through the whole thing in your head and figure out like why that may not be the case. Why this is just like an incredible amount of incompetence. Because why would they expand it in the first place if they're not going to take electoral advantage of it? Because they're idiots. The leadership is horrible. Anyways, here's someone who is not horrible. Representative Katie Porter. And talking to the Commonwealth Fund Vice President, Dr. Sarah Collins, about using some props to visualize the disparity between how much private insurance companies spend on marketing relative to Medicare.
Dr. Collins, what percentage of revenue do private insurance companies spend on administrative costs?
Between about 17 to 18% of spending in private insurance plans.
So if I pay my insurance company $100, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, $17 go to administrative costs. What about Medicare? What do they spend on administrative costs?
That range is about 3 to 5%.
3 to 5%. About 3 to 5%. Right here. And if we look at just billing costs, just billing and insurance costs, Medicare is at 1%. Wait, private companies spend 17 times more on administrative costs than Medicare. What are private insurance companies spending on that Medicare is not? Does Medicare spend hundreds of millions of dollars on television advertisements like private insurance does? Dr. Collins?
No.
Does Medicare spend millions of dollars on stock buybacks to shareholders?
No.
Does Medicare spend money on marketing? Private insurance likes to put its name on stadiums and PGA tournaments. Is there a Medicare arena?
No.
Does Medicare spend $23 million on executive pay like private insurance companies do?
No.
We know how much it costs to run a high-quality health insurance program. $1. Out of $100, Research shows that Medicare spends 1.1% on administrative costs. We spend $4 trillion on healthcare every year. We could save $200 billion on administrative costs with Medicare for all. And those savings, they could go to expand Medicare. We could spend that money to let patients see dentists. We could spend that money to let patients pay for hearing aids, to help older adults afford eyeglasses, to bring down the cost of prescription drugs, to finally pay mental health professionals for the work they do. Instead, all this money is wasted. We're not talking about paying to keep the lights on in operating rooms or improving the quality of care. All this money is used to pay big insurance to push paper. It's death by 200 billion paper cuts.
There it is. I mean, that's, put aside the question of whether we want to make sure that every single person has health insurance. Put aside the question of whether we want to make health insurance something that is almost invisible, that doesn't require literally hours and hours of weekly, monthly work by people who are trying to get some type of reimbursement. I can tell you, how much of my month, everybody knows, but if you have kids too, and they're like going to the dentist and they're, we got to take one kid to therapy or whatever it is, broken ankle, it is a second job. But even putting that aside, putting aside all the principles as to why you would want Medicare for all, it is far less expensive, not just for in terms of what the government expends even now.
Yeah.
Even now.
And more efficient.
And more efficient, is the
well, when you cut out the price gouging middleman, yeah, that's what's going to happen.
And that doesn't even work
plus
in
the
the idea.
executives, plus all the things that Katie Porter listed there.
Right. But that doesn't even then start to speak to the efficiencies you get from normalizing the cost of medicine across the board. So it's important to amplify these moments. We have a couple other clips and we'll play them later in the program. We got a couple of words from our sponsor, and then we're going to be talking to Paul Renfro, assistant professor of history at Florida State University, author of Stranger Danger, Family Values, Childhood, and the American Carceral State. It's funny. I was just thinking the other day, I haven't heard anything we haven't had an ad for Quip in a long time. And why did I think that? Because I updated my Quip toothbrush. I haven't gotten it yet, but I ordered the all black metal toothbrush that they have there because I just wanted to look cool.
James Bond over here.
Totally.
Right.
Totally. That was like a total.
Does it have a laser in it?
No, but it does have. It's a smart brush. So I've talked about Quip stuff for a long time. They are, in my mind, a design company that has chosen to design essentially oral hygiene products, toothbrush, the most amazing reusable flosser. It's amazing.
I mean, jokes aside, having a heavier handle for your toothbrush must feel really nice.
It feels really nice, but it fits in my toothbrush stand too. Yeah. So I don't have that problem that you have with other. And the whole point about brushing your teeth is you got to do it. You got to do it on a regular basis. My dentist said to me last Thursday, I don't think you need to come in every 3 months. I think you can come in every 6 months. Because there was a while at a couple of years ago.
Go in every 3 months?
A couple of years ago, when you start to get older, you get gum issues. They want to make sure that but now they're like, we can go back to 6 months because your hygiene practices are excellent. Thank you.
Humble brag.
Yep. Quip gets your smile ready, making good habits easy with all the essentials you need to care for your mouth. The Quip electric toothbrush uses timed vibrations with 30-second pulses to guide a dentist recommended 2-minute clean. It is loved by over 7 million mouths. Those mouths include mine, my daughter's, and my son's. They have a kid-sized toothbrush. And you can even upgrade, which I have done, to the new smart motor to track and improve your brushing and earn sweet rewards. I have no idea what the sweet rewards are. Obviously, they're not sweets because that would run counter to what you want to do with your teeth. But I want to get a sense of like, how well I'm doing and track it.
Right.
I'm a nerd that way. Build your whole routine with even more Quip, like the reusable floss pick or refillable mouthwash. And on top of that, Quip delivers brush heads, fresh floss, and other refills every month from just $5. No extra shipping costs. Great way to take care of your teeth, folks. Only set you get. If you go to getquip.com/majority right now, you're going to get your first refill free. That's your first refill free at getquip.com/majority, spelled GETQUIP.com/majority. Quip, the good habits company. And lastly, sponsor today, My Solar Nerd. Told you the story about My Solar Nerd. Danny, who's a listener, a longtime fan of the show. He worked in the solar industry, didn't like what he saw in terms of some of the practices that were that some of the companies that he knew were operating under. Realized that homeowners who might want to go solar, particularly not just because of the IPCC, but because of just efficiency and self-sustainability and ultimately cost, folks who might want to go solar don't necessarily know how to navigate this. So they don't know, homeowners don't know the options that are currently available. They don't know necessarily that it's possible to retrofit a home with solar panels for no money down. Most homeowners that switch over to solar see significant savings starting in their first year. And this is possible thanks to the Solar Investor Tax Credit. It's at 26% now. It's going to go down to 22% by the end of the year. So you gotta get on this. My Solar Nerd's mission is simple: to help you find the best solar program for your home and make the transition as easy and smooth as possible. What they do is they analyze your usage. They find the best equipment for your needs. They determine the incentives and financing you might qualify for, and then they project manage the process between you and the installers, obtain the permits, et cetera, turnkey type of situation. And some markets, which are prone to power outages, may qualify for off-grid backup solutions. So don't wait. Some of those tax credits and incentives, both on a state level and on the federal level, the 26 is going to drop to 22% at the end of the year. And Majority Report listeners will get a $200 gift card upon installation of their solar system. So check it out. Go to mysolarnerd.com, fill out the inquiry form now. Make sure you select Majority Report listener for how you heard about My Solar Nerd to receive that $200 gift card upon installation. That is mysolarnerd.com. We will put a link to both of those in the podcast and YouTube descriptions, with a reminder that if you want the program free of commercials, you can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. But if you are a member of this program and you want the discounts that you see in these things and these offers, just stop by the blog, every day, or look at the podcast description for the free show. And I think we have it even in the member show. We put those bennies in there. So check those out because you don't want to miss. You want to get the discount on the toothbrush, and My Solar Nerd, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Got to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Paul Renfro, assistant professor of history at Florida State University, author of Stranger Danger: Family Values, Childhood, and the American Carceral State. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the computer. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Paul Renfro, Assistant Professor of History at Florida State University, author of Stranger Danger, Family Values, Childhood, and the American Carceral State. Paul, welcome to the program. I'm here with Emma Vigeland.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you do your book basically in two major parts, maybe arguably three. The first part is where you're looking at specific instances that take place mostly, I guess, like in the 80s, more or less, and to illustrate sort of use these specific cases as to illustrate the dynamic that was developing at that time. Let's start with those three. And then we should say in the second part, you're talking more about the policy response and sort of like society's response to this. Let's talk about why did you choose Eton Patz? And we should say for New Yorkers, you know, this case went unsolved for 30 years. It was just, you know, they solved it essentially. Like, I guess it was 10 years ago now, but the guy was sentenced maybe 2017, 2016 or something like that. But tell us why. And we should also say that your dog is there and he's very excited to be on camera.
He's very much a lap dog. Yeah. You know, so the discourse of missing children and missing and exploited children really started to kind of congeal around the time of the Pates disappearance. And so I think his case is one of the first major ones that you can kind of point to. And one reason that I selected that case as a kind of case study was that his father and his mother really became these outspoken activists and advocates for this issue or for raising awareness about missing and exploited children. And the same could be said for some of the parents who were active in Atlanta in the during the Atlanta child abductions and murders from 1979 through 1981. Camille Bell, for instance, comes to mind. She is an early kind of proponent of raising awareness for this kind of particular framework of kind of missing children and missing and exploited children. And John Walsh also, in the wake of his son's abduction and murder, becomes a very visible activist and a victims' rights kind of spokesperson. So you know, those parents, those bereaved parents, become really important drivers of this movement or this campaign, and their presence kind of in the sources, in newspapers, in you know, government records, congressional records, and the like, that really kind of alerted me to, I guess, cases that were incredibly important or that helped to kind of propel this panic. So the Pates case, I think, is really one of the foremost. And the imagery that I talk a lot about in the book that is so key in his case, because his father was a photographer, a professional photographer, and he took these just remarkable photos of Eton that were plastered all across New York City and were disseminated through the news media. And the fact that this takes place in New York, in Manhattan, you know, the financial capital, some would say, of the world, and most certainly the kind of media capital or news media capital of the U.S. at the very least, that helped to really kind of propel the case.
So the stories that the three sort of, like, I guess, sets of cases tell, it seems, and tell me if this is fair, and we can go into the specifics of it. But the Eton case, or the Eton Pates case, is sort of shows how this impetus, the impetus coming from the parents, let's say, and sort of out of society, to almost like create I guess a boogeyman out there that deals with basically gay child predators, essentially. And the case of the children in Atlanta, and we're talking about 24 of them, shows how race plays into how these stories get disseminated and who is allowed to fall within the sort of like this narrative and not. And then the third one, in terms of Iowa and the Paperboys and Walsh, is about how, I guess, these stories travel in some way. And those three elements that are there, we talk about each one of those different elements as we get, the sort of the type of cases that we're talking about that in your research, generated this narrative, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So you hit on race as a key theme, and race operated differently in each of these contexts. So in the Pates case, you have, coming off of the crises that New York was dealing with in the 70s, fiscal in nature, the crime kind of problem that a lot of folks were concerned about. That helped to structure kind of understandings of threats. And, even though I don't think the discourse surrounding the Pates case was explicitly kind of racialized, I think it was something that was kind of looming over the entire case and how people conceived of it. In the Atlanta cases, you have, exclusively African-American children and adolescents and young adults who are going missing and being murdered. And, I should note, you mentioned the kind of threat of gay predation, or the perceived threat of kind of queer predation. That definitely hangs over the Pates case, actually all of these cases, but it operates differently in Atlanta, where the kind of economic deprivation out of which a lot of these victims come, or almost all of these victims come, that serves to kind of explain their disappearances. And there's this kind of blame that is placed on families. You get this discourse concerning the Black family as kind of inadequate, and not providing the same sort of structure that one might expect from kind of the white idealized family in this moment. And of course, this goes back to the Moynihan report and even further back. But there's this sense that because of kind of cultural deficiency, because of poverty, a lot of the children and adolescents who end up being victimized go out to run errands, right? And there's this sense in a lot of press accounts and police accounts that they are actually engaging in sex work, very young African-American children. And most of these are males, I should say. And so the discourse is much different there, where the victims are kind of being blamed for their own fate, right? And the idea is, okay, these folks are engaged in activities that are rendering them susceptible to abduction and murder. You don't have the same sort of thing happening, obviously, in the Pates case, right? No one is casting aspersions on Pates, the 6-year-old boy. And the same thing doesn't happen in the Iowa Paperboy cases that you mentioned. Johnny Gosch and Eugene Martin are the two prepubescent or pubescent boys who go missing while delivering their papers for the Des Moines Register in 1982 and 1984, respectively. And they're quite clearly kind of running errands, right? I should say, running kind of, or performing a job, right? But there's no kind of implication that they are kind of asking for it, or they're, they are implicated in their own disappearances. And race kind of functions differently there because Iowa is such a white place, and it most certainly kind of shapes how people are talking about the cases. So when the Des Moines Register's editor kind of opines on the circumstances after Eugene Martin goes missing in 1984, he is clearly kind of trying to cover his own ass and saying, this is, because the Register is kind of, implicated in this. Right. It is not actually guaranteeing the safety of its carriers. But he's saying, well, Des Moines used to be a nice place to live, but it's become, or it is potentially going to become like Milwaukee, Chicago, and he explicitly kind of points to these places that are coded African American and have large African American populations. And so there's this kind of discourse of white innocence that very much kind of structures how people are conceiving of those cases.
And how did, I mean, you kind of started talking about it a bit there, but how did the overall cloud of like white flight to the suburbs happening around this time, the conception of the suburbs as a place that's insulated from crime and basically just like Black people in New York, or not New York, but in urban areas, or New York or Atlanta, things like the examples that you brought up earlier. How did that play into that? Because all these things are happening at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So in Iowa, especially, you have this discourse of white innocence and of kind of being exempt from the sorts of terrors or horrors that are associated with majority Black places. So, in Iowa, folks keep saying, this is such an, sorry, my dog's coughing or something. This is such an ideal place. This is a great place to raise a family. And it is not like the places where you would expect this sort of thing to happen, and I mean, there's this refrain of it can't happen here. I can't believe this is happening here. Right. And so that kind of anti-crime discourse, which gets activated in Iowa, I mean, I think you see this throughout the country, but it's particularly clear, I think, in Iowa, and it's almost explicitly kind of racialized there. And I think, as you indicated, I mean, this is associated with all these different trends, right, concerning kind of racial rhetoric and, white flights, opposition to busing, which ultimately kind of serves to underpin the anti-crime discourse that really explodes in the last 2 decades of the 20th century.
All right, so let's move on to what the second half, I guess, which is the sort of the response that these cases, and it's obviously not just these 3 cases, but these are indicative of the type of cases that we were seeing during this era and the way that it was being received by the public. Before we move on to the responses, how was the way that this was received by the public fundamentally different than it had been? I mean, presumably, right? Children were, and it's extremely rare then. It's, in many respects, I think it's even rarer now.
Yeah.
Far rarer now, despite the fact that you wouldn't necessarily know that. But presumably there were cases like this in the 70s, cases like this in the 60s. How was the response different and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you see in the 70s, I mean, some really high profile cases that are similar to these that don't get framed in the same manner. So I talk a bit in the book about the John Wayne Gacy abductions and murders, right? Very famous or infamous cases. The Candyman killings in Houston or the Houston area, right? Very similar cases in that these involved, young men or teenagers, right, who are abducted and eventually slain by kind of one sadistic sort of killer. But tellingly, those cases don't elicit the same sort of attention in the media, at least initially, and they're not kind of understood as missing children cases. And that, as I kind of, I think, noted at the outset, that was a descriptor that kind of gained new meaning or new significance in the early 80s as it serves to kind of gesture toward a social problem. So, there is this fixation on kind of mass murderers, serial killers in the 70s, but this discourse of missing children and missing and exploited children really starts to explode in the early years of the 1980s. And I think a lot of that has to do with, the kind of anti-gay discourse that really intensifies in the late 1970s, and also changes in kind of mass media. So cable news really starts to intensify, or the 24-hour news cycle, enabled by kind of cable news, that really starts to congeal in the early to mid 1980s. And that kind of incentivizes these sorts of stories, or I should say it encourages a lot of news media entities to run with this sort of stuff if it is appealing to people. So that's kind of one, or those are two reasons or two ways in which I think new attention is kind of paid to these cases in this moment. There's this sense attached to that this is a grave and growing concern, right? Rather than one that, these aren't kind of outliers or anything like that. This is evidence of an intensifying, a worsening problem.
I was gonna wait to sort of introduce this till we get through, but I think this seems like an opportune moment. Like, don't you feel, or let me put it this way, my sense is that this is part of that the reason why this takes off, and it's true, CNN starts in 1980, and there's a vehicle for this, but the narrative, the development of the narrative, I don't think comes from the existence of the apparatus that inflates it. In other words, like, that amplifies it. I think, like, CNN wasn't developing the narrative. The narrative was coming out of something. And it seems to me that this is adjacent to the fears that were associated also with daycare centers, which also took place around that time, and certainly in the late 70s. And that this is coming out of, this is not a coincidence that the homophobia and the concern for children was a function of the right in this country, concerned about the change in the role that women were taking, and the way that the patriarchy was being assaulted in some way, and that the most convenient way to address this was not to say that women should stay in the kitchen, although they certainly did at that time. That was one facet of it. But the other is, look at how you're exposing the children. The mother should be in charge of this, unless, of course, the kids are Black, in which case, well, Black people have that's that dominant narrative that comes out of the Monahan report, and frankly, that simply existed. But how much of that is there? Like, where it doesn't feel like your research necessarily looks at that as a driver of this, because I mean, it's just not my sense that this comes out of nowhere, that I think that there was a concerted, if not a concerted effort, although I'm quite convinced there was, but a right-wing narrative that was a reaction to the emancipation of women, at least to a certain extent economically, in the early 70s.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are, tremendous fears about the stability and the sanctity of the American family, and specifically the kind of idealized two-parent, kind of pro-natalist family. And so, anything that's deemed kind of antithetical to that model, whether it's, LGBTQ activists kind of petitioning for gay rights and thus kind of supposedly challenging the primacy of the family, that's deemed a threat. And yeah, women going out and working, right? Even though women have always worked, there's a sense that they are kind of newly emboldened, newly liberated, and this is a threat, right? And also, there's this idea that sexual liberation just kind of generally is a bad thing. And that is kind of encouraging people to do things that will ultimately undermine the idealized family. So, you see this pop up in debates over abortion, over gay rights, as I indicated earlier, in the late 1970s, and the daycare panic, as you indicated. That's a clear example of folks saying, well, if you kind of mess with this model, right, which is tried and true and should not really be challenged, you're sending your children to, be with Satanists, right? And this is going to be detrimental to not just your family, not just to your child, but to the entire society. So yeah, this kind of family values discourse, I think, is quite visible on the right, but it's something that liberals are very much kind of invested in as well. And, you see that in this moment as well with, Christopher Lasch and other folks who are lamenting the decline of this idealized family. And this really kind of reaches its a crescendo of sorts with the Clinton years, or in the Clinton years, right? There's this huge emphasis, whether it's through so-called welfare reform or the crime bill, and going after deadbeat dads, with kind of preserving the family or shoring up the family that is understood to be kind of embattled. And so this issue of missing and exploited children, I think, very clearly fits into that, as do all these other issues as well.
So let's talk more about that. That response. I mean, you mentioned some of those things under Clinton that are initiatives that can be sort of like drawn directly. There, you can draw a direct line between this sense, and frankly, I was also struck too how much the politicians of that era in the early '90s, Nancy Pelosi, for instance, who came into power at that time. Every refrain is, we've got to do it for the children. We've got to do it for the children. And in fact, when Clinton was impeached, it was all about, what are we going to tell the children? And this sort of like obsession that developed over the course of those, 20 years, I think, following the mid 70s, we became so child focused, not necessarily in some instances making sure they have health insurance or good education or something like that, maybe, to a certain extent, but that was somewhat secondary to this sort of like, we've got to maintain their purity, or, keep their, and this ends up creating a sort of, I guess, the reaction is the increase of the carceral state. I mean, let's talk about that, on how that sort of develops.
Yeah, you see several different initiatives in the Reagan years. I mean, some of this is kind of done through the private sector. Reagan is very much, as we all know, kind of interested in devolution and, bolstering the private sector, the business sector. So you see this through initiatives like the infamous milk carton campaign, which is undertaken by dairies and the like, but and similar sorts of programs. But really, I think the enduring legacy of this is in the carceral states and at the federal level. And most visibly, you see it with the Jacob Wetterling Act and Megan's Law, and similar sorts of memorial laws, so-called memorial laws, kind of named after missing or slain or exploited children. And so the Wetterling Act is named after a boy who was kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered in Minnesota in 1989. And this gets tucked into the very infamous 94 crime bill, and essentially kind of mandates the adoption of sex offense registries nationwide. And this is kind of, a technology that was adopted by some states earlier, and it has antecedents kind of in the Lavender Scare and the Second Red Scare in California specifically. But it explodes once the crime bill is passed. And something like 1 million people are now registered on sex offense registries in the United States. And, I think a lot of folks would say, well, that's a good thing, right? But there's very little evidence to suggest that it, prevents harm from being perpetrated. And in fact, it's kind of an intervention that is only kind of focused on perpetrators after harm has already been committed. And, for that reason, I think a lot of folks are kind of looking askance at it and saying, well, I don't know if this is actually working in the way that a lot of folks thought it would. And it also kind of misdirects attention from the very nature of sexual harm toward children, which not almost always, but largely takes place within the home and within kind of trusted institutions, whether it's the church or the synagogue or the school, right? And, so it is, I think it lulls people into a false sense of security, right? And it's something that I think a lot of people kind of consult and say, well, this is where the bad people live, or this is where sexual harm takes place, when in fact, it's broader than that. And without kind of evaluating that, you're not really doing anything to eradicate the issue, which is a huge issue, right? It's just not being addressed in the way that a lot of people, I think it is through the carceral state.
And how much did the scare, I guess the fear about the children also drive the drug war? Because it seems to me, having grown up in the 80s, that Just Say No was really geared, I mean, it was ostensibly geared towards society, but it was really geared towards children, it seemed to me. I mean, and Nancy Reagan headed that up, and it just seemed, more focused on children, because saying to an adult, just say no, sounds ridiculous. It also sounds ridiculous if you're a kid too, frankly. But how much of that was sort of I don't know, I'm trying to draw an analogy between like, the political body and the armed resistance, like how much of that Just Say No, which ostensibly is to protect the children, ends up being a, sort of the softer side of 3 strikes and you're out, or you're going to jail immediately, if you're caught with any drugs, that type of thing.
Yeah, I think it's quite comparable to the sort of messaging you see on issues like stranger danger, where, you tell children, okay, say no to strangers, this is how you prevent yourself from being harmed, even though, again, it's not strangers for the most part who are doing these sorts of things. And then the kind of, hard state response or punitive response is, the carceral states, increasing sentences for various offenses, encouraging people or forcing people to register for life for certain offenses. And in the war on drugs, I mean, which is also very child focused, and I think, that kind of gestures back to what we were just talking about concerning all these anxieties and fears that are centered on the child, which is at the heart of this supposedly embattled family. Drugs are a perfect example, right? And this is also growing out of the sort of moment, the 60s, 70s kind of moment of liberation that you discussed earlier, Sam, right? The idea that children and young adolescents are kind of doing drugs. They are turning into bad people because of drugs, because of the anti-war movement, the hippies and liberation and all that stuff that is deemed antithetical to the American family. That is kind of informing a lot of the messaging on the war on drugs. Just say no, but it's also informing, as you suggested, also the kind of crackdown, right? And there's a clear racial component here as well, right? Where more therapeutic, kind of softer measures are directed toward white families. There's a historian, Matt Lasseter, a mentor of mine, who writes about, white children and teenagers as kind of impossible criminals, right? Even when they're the ones who are selling drugs, doing drugs. The idea is that it has to be the black and brown kind of pusher who has infiltrated the suburbs and kind of forced them to sell drugs, right? And they are redeemable. That is, the white teenagers are redeemable, and the black pusher or the brown pusher is most certainly not, and cannot be dealt with through kind of therapeutic, softer sort of means, but needs to be locked up indefinitely. And that's what happens with so many people, obviously.
We're seeing shade. It's not the same thing, but we're definitely seeing shades of that, I think, with this anti-trans push where, our children are pure white slates, and the only way that they can move to the side of the evil liberals, or be a part of, 21st century society, maybe questioning their own identity, gender identity, sexual identity, is if they're indoctrinated by people in schools, malevolent forces. There's less of the racial component there, but that's the same thing, save the children, and it's just a copy and paste. CRT is that,
I
though,
mean,
yeah.
we're living in a moment right now where this is having a resurgence, right? I mean, aren't we? This is all. I mean, this dynamic seems to be playing out. I could look at a half a dozen stories over the past two months that, you know, whether it's Supreme Court justice or whether it's you know, don't say gay in Florida. I mean, this seems to be playing out. There's a resurgence of this.
Yeah, I think it's cyclical. So, I mean, you can look, I mean, the schools and children are often kind of sites of cultural battles, you know, in the larger culture wars. So you can look back to at least the Scopes trial, right, in 1925 concerning the teaching of evolution in Tennessee schools. You know, there are fears about kind of so-called juvenile delinquents in the 50s. You know, there are clearly debates over busing and school desegregation in the mid 20th century and into the late 20th century, and even today, really. And, you know, in the 90s, you saw this great kind of a great deal of anxiety concerning college campuses and indoctrination and political correctness, you know, back in the kind of first iteration of that panic, illiberalism, that sort of thing on college campuses. And I think you see that also today clearly with many of the bills and discourses that you're talking about, whether it's CRT or the trans panic, or even, you know, this is kind of adjacent, I think, but with the kind of interrogation of Ketanji Brown Jackson, you know, the idea that she is kind of soft on crime and thus sort of enabling child abuse or kind of facilitating it. And this is very much kind of a line that Josh Hawley and others have adopted. And, you know, in their mind, it's kind of effective, right? And I think it's of a piece with what you saw in Virginia in the governor's race, you know, the parents matter sort of mantra, right? And, you know, a lot of this is kind of connected to COVID as well. And so it might not be, Emma, as you indicated, kind of explicitly racialized, but there's a clear kind of racial and class component to it as well, where kind of white parents, wealthy parents are more likely to kind of want their children back in schools. And, you know, there's plenty of data to indicate that, you know, parents of color are less kind of inclined. They're, you know, in some ways more concerned about safety in these spaces.
I just want to touch on Alfred Regnery.
Yeah.
Because this guy is quite a trip. I have a couple theories about him, actually. But we should also say, like, his publishing house has been like the #1 publisher for all the most noxious right-wing books that we are aware of. In fact, they also, I think, they also were the publisher who was working there was like intimately involved in setting up getting the wiring of in Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, or the recording Monica Lewinsky. I mean, this is, and this guy was in the Reagan administration, and you know, I remember Ed Meese, and also, like, talk about who he is. And, you know, he exited places in a way that felt like there was another part of the story, frankly. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but I have my suspicions. But tell us about him.
Yeah, so Regnery is kind of a classic sort of Reaganite in that he kind of took this position as the head of the OJJDP, which is the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And like others who took such kind of leadership positions in the administration, or kind of adjacent to the administration, whether in the DOJ, and I should say that the OJJDP is in the DOJ, he was kind of hostile to the very sort of mission of the OJJDP, and more than anything, he kind of used this discourse of missing and exploited children to inform harsher juvenile justice penalties, right? And there's kind of a clear sort of discourse here that he is spearheading, or he is kind of pioneering, that is very racialized, very classed. And I argue that it's kind of the precursor to the super predator idea. There's this notion that so-called juvenile offenders are getting more violent, more serious, less remorseful, and this requires less coddling, to kind of use his language, and it requires, you know, the federal government to really crack down. And he's, you know, he kind of relishes punishment, and there's this clear sort of Manichaean worldview that he's applying here, or into which all these different things fit. So, you know, some kids are very good and some kids are very bad. And usually the bad kids are poor and Black or Latinx. And the white kids who are kind of runaways are, again, kind of redeemable. And the state needs to intervene in those cases, but not in a punitive way. So I think this, in many ways, kind of lays the foundation for, you know, so much of the discourse that we see in the 90s that, you know, both parties participate in, that Hillary Clinton kind of very enthusiastically participates in. But yeah, he's quite a character. I don't want to go into all of the little anecdotes, but yeah, he very clearly kind of relishes kind of punishment, and you know, he has these kind of fantastical stories about abuse and violence, some of which are kind of not true.
Well, let me, because I mean, this is like, because he is such an important figure in so much of our, you know, I mean, he's in the administration at that time, and this is where that history gets, and we've seen people who came out of that era implicate our politics, you know, dramatically. John Roberts was also in that same DOJ, wanted to get rid of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, and you know, manages to live out his dream.
I mean, Giuliani's in this book, you know, a lot of people, as you suggested.
But Region, my understanding is, when he was running for local office in Wisconsin, claimed that his wife had been like home invasion and had been sexually assaulted. And police came. They found no evidence of any of that. But the guy had a massive stash of pornography, which, you know, and like I say, this is the time of Ed Meese, where they were trying to sort of like ban all pornography. And he ended up, then he had like a series of resignations that were like super abrupt. And, you know, over the coming years, it just seems to me that, like, you know, I don't know, but my theory is that, like, this is someone's psychological issues just playing out in projection, which seems to me to have been so much of what drove a lot of the politics at that time.
Yeah, I mean, and to elaborate on that story, his wife had claimed that she had been stabbed, you know, 60 or 70 times or something like that. And all of the marks associated with that appeared to have been self-inflicted. And even though the police came, as you indicated, and said, yeah, this didn't happen, the news kind of didn't run with that, right? They kind of confirmed his story, or you know, suggested that there were maybe some questions about what had actually occurred, even though, you know, all the stab marks very clearly were kind of inflicted by his wife. And yeah, I'm not a psychoanalyst, but, you know, there has to be some projection when it comes to, you know, folks who are so invested in kind of these visions of violence and abuse, and almost seek to kind of, I don't know, insinuate themselves into those scenarios, right?
Right. It seems like he and his wife wanted to be victimized in that way, wanted whatever the consequences of or I guess wanted some sort of like sympathy or morality assigned to them because they are victimized in some way, and thus validating their worldview and manufacturing it. I mean, there's some dark stuff there, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we'll leave it at that. Paul Renfro, assistant professor of history at Florida State University, author of Stranger Danger, Family Values, Childhood in the American Carceral State. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Fascinating work.
Thank you all so much. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half. The number is 646-257-3920. We will take phone calls today. We will take your IMs, which you can IM us through the app at majorityapp.com.
Yes, we will take calls today.
Emma's going to take a quick nap in between.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yawn. I found the interview interesting.
No, I was implied.
I'm a bad sleeper. That's why
I couldn't sleep last night either. I don't know what the heck's going on.
I know why I didn't sleep last night. It's Grand Tactic Civil War.
That just comes in bleary-eyed because of his new video game.
I invaded Richmond last night.
Congratulations.
Oh, no way.
They deserved it.
It really killed the Confederate morale.
Folks, don't forget, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, if you want to see the live show, ladies and gentlemen, Friday, you're going to get a taste of maybe what's going on that live show. I don't know. Maybe we'll play that. Maybe we won't. I'm not sure. But we will, we may have a hint, but the bottom line is, special guest in Boston, May 15th. You can join us by going to majoritylive.com, clicking on the link to the Boston show and getting a ticket. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckie and media universe?
Yeah, tonight we got Andrew Perez of The Lever, formerly known as the Daily Poster. We're talking about a couple stories he's got out. One, most recent, about the Connor Lamb super PAC that's attacking Fetterman as too much of a socialist. And also the centrist, I forget what the PAC's name was, but it's pharma-backed that's supporting Kirsten Sinema. And also the Cook brothers. So talking about money and politics tonight, patreon.com/leftreckoning to get the post game.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow.
What? What is that going on?
It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
Fun.
What is up, everyone?
Fun. Nomi Key.
You did it.
Fun.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Fun. Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is it?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports.
We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm going to go throw up.
Who libertarians?
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35-501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
6, 5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye-bye. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland. The fun half, ladies and gentlemen, of the Majority Report, as you can see right there.
That's it. The Majority Report.
Get our new fancy schmancy logo.
Yeah. The Zoom era is in the rearview mirror.
That's right.
What do we, for Thursdays, maybe we need a logo from me.
Well,
what do you think about that, Sam?
Let's move on to some clips. Mentioned this up at the top of the show that the House Oversight Committee is having hearing on universal health care. And AOC and Katy Porter. Katy Perry did not show up. Apparently, they were hoping that she would. Avril Lavigne also.
Good job.
Two names of like.
Good job.
Katy Porter and AOC took the time to introduce the idea that Medicare for All is the most efficient way of delivering health insurance for everyone. And here she is talking with Dr. Sarah Collins. She is the Commonwealth Fund Vice President. Commonwealth Fund is I guess you could call it a think tank about health policy. Here is that exchange.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Bush, and to all of our witnesses for being here today. But I just have to underscore how grateful we are for Representative Bush's leadership and determination in securing such a historic and unprecedented hearing, not just for this committee, but for the country. So thank you. We know that private insurance is the primary health coverage for 2/3 of Americans, with the majority of private insurance being employer-sponsored. But what I think most people in the U.S., most working class people need to contend with is the fact that the money employers spend on health benefits, and particularly for-profit private health insurance, comes from the money that they would have otherwise spent on our wages. Dr. Collins, in 2020, the standard company-provided health insurance policy totaled over about $7,000 a year for single coverage and over $21,000 a year for family coverage. Is that correct?
Yes.
And with employer-sponsored insurance, your employer pays a large portion and you pay a smaller portion, correct?
Yes.
So in the case of individual coverage, if the total cost is around $7,400 and your employer pays, say, $6,200, and then you pay for around $1,200, now that's thousands of dollars more that everyday people could be saving per year if it weren't going directly to insurance companies' private profits, correct?
Yes.
Interesting. So one of the things that we're really seeing here is that the potential to moving to a Medicare for All system could actually give people a raise in many circumstances. Now, a common rebuttal to that, and a common rebuttal to Medicare for All that you'll hear from conservatives and the right, is that we would merely just change the way in which that same premium is charged, and that those same dollars would come at that are coming out of our paychecks now will then just be coming out in the form of taxes. But the truth is that Medicare for All actually lowers the overall cost of healthcare as well. Dr. Collins.
There you go. I mean, all that's true. And
important that the American public hears this. I don't know how much of the American public is going to hear this, but it's good they're getting it out there. It's good they're getting it on the record. You'll notice that there was no one else sitting in these committee hearings. But again, it is to communicate to the rest of the country these concepts, ones that Bernie Sanders introduced to people. And so it's happening. Now, I'm going to, one should not assume that just because in Congress people say these things, whether it comes out of committee in some type of vote or not, that it's going to, the American public is going to rise up and take notice. But I'll tell you what is happening is that you're getting a generation of politicians who do not have necessarily the power in leadership, but you're getting a generation of politicians who are telling their colleagues and who are communicating to people of their generation that this is the most obvious thing to go to.
And in terms of, some of the concepts that she's breaking down there as well, I'm not sure if she gets into it later because that was a longer video than what we played, but it helps in terms of union leadership may want to hang on. Some union leadership may want to hang on to their healthcare plans in a way that I don't necessarily agree with. But in terms of like the broader context, this helps in terms of union negotiations with employers and with bosses because you take healthcare out of the equation in that sense. If you do have Medicare for all, it allows for higher wages, both in terms of the costs of what's being taken out of your paycheck, but also in terms of negotiating those higher wages because there's less bargaining power from the employer.
That's exactly it. I mean, it has become increasingly apparent, I think, not just to me, but to, I think, broadly in society, that healthcare is not just about the cost in terms of that relationship between employer and employee. It is about control. And I think we are seeing, a lot of the great resignation. I mean, there's more data out there. People are still leaving their jobs.
Right.
And, it increases the wage leverage of workers. But why are they doing that? Because we are at probably one of the highest levels of health insurance coverage that we've seen in this country's history at this point. And much of that is a function of subsidies that still exist under the COVID relief bill. Now, COBRA, I think that has ended as of like last fall, late fall, but there's a lot of subsidies in terms of the Affordable Care Act where it frees people up a little bit. But that dynamic could get increased. And I think to a certain extent, that's why when you see there's multiple fronts that are fighting against Medicare for all. One of them is the medical providers. To some extent, it's the insurance companies. But again, I think that there's still money for them to be made in just the administering of a Medicare for all type of program. And they're just not that huge of an industry, despite the fact that they make our healthcare so inefficient. But medical providers are a big one. I think in some instances, some unions are a big one because they perceive that as the biggest value add that they offer people. Sometimes people get fixed in their old ways and don't have the vision to see beyond that. And then the other part is, I think, just broadly speaking, employers want to control their workers.
Yep.
And this is a big, big, big source of control because it's not, it's not just you as an individual, it's your family too that is jeopardized.
You want better conditions. You want to be treated better by your boss. You want maybe to find something else, go become self-employed, do what you want to do, well, you need the health insurance.
Yeah, I mean, all the things that supposedly like Bitcoin or something, it's to allow like artists and creators to get money. Like, no, if you want to support any sort of affiliate industry, whether it's news, musicians, West Virginia miners, you give them healthcare. Also, it's a solution to cancel culture, or at least it goes away to ameliorate the negative effects of cancel culture. Because one of the biggest problems with cancel culture is you lose your job and ability to provide for yourself. If we took that off the table, healthcare, then all of a sudden these conversations become a little bit less, the stakes become a lot lower.
Yeah. I mean, if cancel culture was a good faith debate about it, not just people who are wealthy.
But it's like, it goes back to like the John Ronson book of public shaming. It's like, I think public shaming, yeah, like if you do something that gets misinterpreted or overinterpreted, that's the social ramifications are awful. But it's really the material factors where your inability to like get a job in the future, like to go to a hospital if you're sick, that stuff needs to be taken care of. Then a lot of this stuff doesn't matter, which we're not talking about the right thing is what I'm pointing out.
Right.
Someone suggested we get Ronson on for his just did a podcast on satanic panic.
I saw that. I wrote that down because I want to listen to that. That sounds good.
He's a great writer, and he also does like radio shows going way back. So I bet he did a good treatment of that.
I'm going to download that podcast.
Okay, take it easy. Don't need to advertise too much. Other shows. Jeez,
phone?
Pete. Calling from a 757 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is me.
It is you.
Okay, this is Jay from Canada, calling back in. I called in and talked about long COVID a couple weeks ago. Got cut off by incessant phone calls.
What's up, Jay? Let's hear it from Canada.
Yeah. So, if you're okay with going back to kind of what we were talking about, it was about the politicization of science and how the right has done that quite horribly, but that the left is or at least leftist governments have taken part in it too, where they have equated their decisions with science, like saying that they are following the science or they are doing what science says, when in reality science can only tell us what is and isn't the case. It doesn't actually tell us what policy decisions are, and those are political decisions based on whatever priorities that you're going to be balancing. And so as governments, even leftist governments, are telling people that COVID is basically over, don't worry about vaccine mandates, mask mandates, everything else, that a lot of the people have equated those two in their heads, like, oh, if the government says it now, then it must be safe. And that's something that I even have to deal with my family, who now I'm the first generation university student, and my family just the government says it's safe now, so why is it that you're telling us to still wear a mask? And just sorry, it makes things harder that way. And I think it also helps feed the narratives where when you have leftist governments that make odd exceptions, like restaurants were an exception for a long time. You had to wear a mask just to go sit down, and then you took it off, and just like little weird things like that, which weren't what scientists said to do or was the smart thing to do, and gave kind of fodder for the right to say further question science.
Right.
And I just think it like that eroding of the barrier between science and politics is something that is harmful, as being kind of done by political figures on both sides.
I mean, I think, listen, I would agree that it's certainly being done, at this point, looking back, it's certainly been done by both the Biden administration and the Trump administration. It is hard to make a guess as to the counterfactual of what if Donald Trump in January of 2020 had taken COVID seriously. What if he hadn't, we hadn't eliminated all the sort of like early alarm bells systems that we had for monitoring what was going on in Wuhan province. Frankly, we had, well, what if he hadn't demoted the official who would have been talking about pandemics at like cabinet meetings or sub cabinet meetings? But even if he had taken it seriously from the very beginning, and the narrative had changed, there would not been, in my estimation, and again, this is total speculation, the political pressure on the Biden administration, which it seems to me they have caved to in terms of we're going to just COVID's over because we say it's over. And that's basically what's happened to a large extent. Now we're seeing numbers go up in this country. It remains to be seen the implications of it. They just announced a fourth, shot, a booster, but the number of people who got their third shot is actually sort of like stunningly low in this country. And one wonders, eventually people are just going to say, like, I'm done with it. I don't care anymore. And you're fighting that, but it's exacerbated by starting with a rump of the country already deciding that COVID was never real to begin with, or that it was never to be taken seriously, or that you couldn't. And so that distrust metastasizes and becomes, I think, at one point overwhelming. And that's where we're at. I agree with you. I mean, it's like it is, and frankly, and I'm a very cautious person with this stuff. And I find myself just sort of like dropping my guard because, you're getting This is the amazing thing too, is that everybody would say like, oh, you're wearing a mask is just like a signifier. Well, you know what? That's the way social beings work. When I was
signifies we're in a pandemic.
Yes, but it also makes it just simply much easier to maintain your own mask wearing if you see other people who are doing it. And like, I'm inclined to do that.
Yeah.
And certainly like, at our show, we were wearing masks in the green room, for the most part. And, we encourage people to wear masks in the audience. And I think it sort of like, it has an effect on your behavior when you see it. And the cost associated with that is exactly
Your
the
freedom.
cost of a mask.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, it's very minimal.
And so, but yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's a very, but look, I'm also looking at China. They're doing zero COVID there. And you wonder, like, it's a different structure of their society, but we're going to feel it here when they shut down all these places. And,
Well, yeah,
and they're going to feel it too.
That study just came out. That study just came out of China, where they were looking, and they are moving COVID up from a mild disease for children to a moderate to severe because of the increased rates of PICU and deaths in comparison to other variants in children.
Yes.
And
now here's the
here in
one thing
Western
I will just
society,
say.
we have unvaccinated under 5 and
Yes.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, the one thing I will just say, and again, science isn't, sort of like a binary situation where we know or we don't know. It is, and we're not going to know nearly 3 years from now what we know today about what's happening today, frankly. But my understanding is the Omicron that we had in this country was BA 1.1. The Omicron that they had in Europe was BA 1. And there is some speculation, but again, it's too early to tell. And again, it's just like the preponderance of rationality would be err on the side of caution. But it's possible that because we had 1.1, that there is some resilience or protection from BA2 because our variant was actually a subvariant of the original Omicron variant.
Yes, at least with acute infections, I think that you are right that it's like the safe presumption to hold, but we don't know that that's
but we
true
don't know
with,
that that's true,
long-term
and so
systemic damage and long COVID,
exactly.
et cetera.
And so you err on the side of caution, and and look, and here's the other thing. It's this is the other sort of I think unfortunate thing about this whole episode, this whole pandemic. The difference between all of us being in this room here and having the window open and not is significant. The difference between being in this room, all of us being in this room and having the window open and having one air filter or 2 air filters, that one needs to be turned on, is significant. It makes a difference. It may mean that only, one out of the other three would get it if one person had it. I mean, there's so many other factors, but you are just
but each factor is exponential as they add together, right?
Exactly.
Like if you remove mitigation faction or add them together, you're getting exponential or removing exponential amounts of protection.
We keep
and
losing.
You're totally right about that.
We keep losing the original sort of a theory that was out there in terms of like Swiss cheese, right? Like, okay, I put up this protection and this protects me, and people are like, well, you're not fully protected. Well, that's true. And then I put up another protection, and then I put up another layer, and eventually it's like polarized glasses. Like eventually, if you keep putting up protections, you're going to mitigate your risk factors. And so, but none of this, because it didn't happen from the get-go, it created a vacuum. And there is nothing that sort of irrationality, insanity, and malignant narratives enjoy more than a vacuum. And so that is like one of the. And
but that Trump situation didn't exist in Canada, and we do have a similar issue here. And I think that the stark contrast between the demand on the citizenry and the support that you provide them when you are asking them to sacrifice, right? Like we had CERB, which was we paid people $2,000 a month to stay home if you had to stay home for COVID, but then that just ended. And as soon as that ended, people's willingness to sacrifice their actual finances, put their jobs at risk, not sure what to do with their kids when their kids' school closes, etc., it goes way downhill because the government is no longer there saying, hey, we got your back while we're demanding these things of you for our society.
Yep. You need to have support. You need to make it as easy as possible for people to do the right thing. And
hell, it's our money.
Yep.
like we're the taxpayers. The federal government in Canada gave $500 million to the Ontario Conservative government to upgrade new ventilation systems for schools, for school reopenings, and he didn't spend it and used it instead for a tax cut. So typical conservative behavior.
Appreciate the call.
And none of my family. Sorry, go ahead. Right.
Well, I got to say goodbye, but I appreciate the call.
Left is best. Yeah. Bye-bye.
I just want to say real quick on that, like the only I agree with that call. I just say the only thing I quibble with is calling a lot of these governments leftist governments. Like I agree that individuals matter, and like generally, if any pandemic breaks out, I'd rather have like some like Joe Biden than Donald Trump. But it also shows you the limits of like this is bourgeois liberalism and like the imperatives of capital. Like when you talk about that rump that's left over, there's like the dumb people who were like, misled by Fox News and whoever was saying it wasn't real. But the real rump that mattered was like the National Restaurant Association and those sorts of folks.
And the Glibbertarian, the Josh Barrows and the, who are, sort of like Thomas Friedmaning, functioning as the midwives to basically convince us all that we're being over,
a new world order is going to come from this, as opposed to like capitalists are really looking forward to getting the pandemic behind so we can get back to business as normal.
Right. And I mean, all these things interplay with each other, right? And just even the interview we just did, it came out of a religious fundamentalism that created these things, but the narrative gets to a certain critical mass where then it's adopted by the Clintons. And I don't know if that was necessarily driven by capitalism per se, as much as it was sort of like political expediency, because at the end of the day,
it's a movement that can be used for control that doesn't threaten capitalism.
Yep.
Exactly. Punch Drunk Pulpit. Sam, I know you're big on striped shirts, but have you considered dots? I get that from your perspective, dot patterns are a new invention, but it's worth trying new things with the last few years you have left. First off, we'll make it clear, I do have a shirt with dots, and I have worn it on this program at least like 2 or 3 times, but it is so jarring to me to see that.
It's hard to do dots right, gotta say.
It's a blue shirt.
I've seen it before.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that's not?
No, I think it does it well. But
this is moirang. I thought that this wouldn't moire, but it's moirang. Is it moirang when it goes out too?
It's not so bad once it gets to YouTube, I don't think.
Yeah, it's too bad. And I don't know if anybody picked up on this, but first time I think I've ever worn an undershirt.
Your mic is blocking it.
Well, maybe that's best because it's a little bit it's a little risque.
I feel like it's the opposite of risque because normally, right, you don't
Yep.
wear one.
Normally I don't wear one, but it's but I was like, it was too cold today to just wear the shirt alone. And I was like, I am not gonna wear a sweater. I'm done with that shit.
I hate looking at them.
If we were able to pretend that
No, I
COVID
meant mine. I meant mine, not your sweaters. I like see them in my drawer. Like I haven't yet put all of them on the upper part of the closet where I do that. You know, I'll do that in the summer. And seeing the fact that they're still in my normal drawer, it's like, fuck you. I hate you.
I mean, my feeling was if we can pretend that COVID has gone away, we can pretend that winter has gone away.
Right.
And so I'm not wearing that sweater. Twit chat demands the V-neck chest hair, says Entroma. How about a poggers instead? Well, we'll give you one of these. That's for Twitch. Just became a member today. Love the show. Left is best, says Damon Developer. What should we move on to here? Should we do here's Sean Hannity,
Okay.
Josh Hawley, two of the feminist champions that we have seen over the years who are bringing up the feminist position. Wasn't Josh Hawley talking about how we need to reestablish the traditional family, just like I don't know,
and
3
restore
weeks ago?
masculinity? There's a crisis about it
Masculinity's under attack, right?
from Pornhub.
Yeah.
Right. So here we have two of America's leading foremost feminists concerned that people are somewhat concerned about the fact that a Supreme Court justice who is bound to hear questions surrounding voting in the 2020 election and future elections, dealing with Donald Trump and maybe even the attack on the Capitol, has a wife who is a paid operative to actually do everything to be specifically involved. I mean, also the Supreme Court may hear stuff about whether Donald Trump needs to hand over those 7 hours worth of missing records that seem to have been. For all we know, we know that Ginny Thomas was texting the chief of staff. Maybe she was calling or texting Trump.
The Nixon vibes are all over this. Like Nixon famously started doing all the taping because I think perhaps really thought that he himself was being taped. The projection is really insane on this. So like Ginny Thomas having these insane beliefs and also conspiring behind the scenes to actually do a conspiracy is Republican sort of the MO.
Exactly. And to be clear, Nixon thought that he didn't want anybody to cut up tapes and make him look bad. So he's going to keep his own tapes to make sure that he looks bad in the way that he looks bad.
Yeah, those hours are privileged, actually. My burner phones are presidential privilege.
But let's hear the feminists absolutely not get the point.
Yeah. Let me go to the case of Clarence Thomas. Okay, so Clarence Thomas's wife has opinions. Is she not free to express them? I think it would be natural for people that are dating, people that are married. There probably are a number of issues people disagree on, a number of issues they agree on. If that's the case, if that's the standard now Democrats want to set, wouldn't that apply to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and the laptop? And wouldn't Joe equally have to be impeached himself or recused? As
Wait, can you pause? I know the whistle on the S's is horrible. Is the left making a claim that Ginny Thomas and Clarence Thomas cannot have intramarital discussions about politics?
No.
Okay, just making that clear.
But I love the part. Go back just a little bit because Hannity's going to make the argument that Joe Biden should recuse himself.
We have to listen to more of his whistling S's.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry. But I want you to think as Sean Hannity says this. What would Joe Biden recuse himself in regard to the Hunter Biden investigation?
I'm no longer your father.
Listen, Jack.
I mean, I would like to see Joe Biden come out and resign from the Hunter Biden Investigative Task Force and also the Hunter Biden.
It's a conflict of interest.
It's he shouldn't be on that task force. And the idea that they have this plan at the White House where Joe Biden's going to sit in as for the judge on the day that Hunter Biden shows up. That just seems wrong to me. But continue.
If that's the case, if that's the standard now Democrats want to set, wouldn't that apply to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and the laptop? And wouldn't Joe equally have to be impeached himself or recused as they're trying to do to Clarence Thomas?
Yeah, I look forward to all of the calls for Joe Biden's resignation from all of these Democrats on exactly the same logic that you just outlined, Sean. So, if Hunter Biden ends up getting indicted, as looks increasingly likely, then I guess the president needs to resign for that. I mean, here's the bottom line. This is ridiculous, these attacks on Justice Thomas. And the idea that Jenny Thomas, his wife, is supposed to sign off on her texts and on her work with her husband as if he's in charge of her in some way. Isn't that misogyny? Isn't that exactly what the Democrats are always saying that they're against? But the truth is that they will take any avenue they can to try and smear Justice Thomas. And Republicans have got to stand up against it and say, we're not going to let you smear and rig the Supreme Court, which is what they're trying to do.
I love how Holly came so close to saying, like, the Democrats, and he's right. I do think that it's inappropriate to hold Clarence Thomas to account for what Ginny Thomas does. I think Ginny Thomas is her own person. But there is such a concept of conflict of interest, and this is it. There is no other example that one could have beyond this that would be any more illustrative of a conflict of interest. Or, and I should remind you, the concept of conflict of interest is not just a direct conflict of interest. It is the appearance of a conflict of interest.
I mean, that's out the window. Appearance of impropriety is something we got to bring that back, folks.
Josh Hawley came so close to saying, I thought the Democrats were against misogyny. I mean, that's what we believe.
Yeah, right. He didn't. It was just it was a total Greenwald, an opportunity to call out Democratic hypocrisy while still maintaining one's odious position. Like, there's not really necessarily, any moral high ground that he's taking there.
But I love the idea that they're going to come out. I would love for them to really adopt this. I mean, because I agree with him. Joe Biden shouldn't be anywhere near any type of investigation or adjudication of Hunter Biden's activities.
Yeah.
And I think we can all agree with that. And let's do it with the Supreme Court justice.
And did Hunter Biden's laptop dick pics pose an existential threat to United States democracy? I'm just trying to make
it
sure.
Could.
Yeah.
It depends on what the pictures look like. Watch out, America. Let's go to the phones. Call from a 216 area code.
Hey, this is Steven from Pittsburgh.
Steven from Pittsburgh.
Firstly, Emma, thanks for the Rangers beating the Pens yesterday on my birthday. It was a real nice present from you.
I'm happy to give you that gift.
So two quick things. One, there was a rabbit hole I fell down into yesterday, which was sort of related to the sort of salient point you had made recently regarding trans issues, where you said, these people have always existed, which I thought was, it's a really smart thing to say, especially since it ties into, one of those concepts that Sam likes, where, we seem to constantly live in like a state of amnesia of history and things like that. And have you ever heard of the I'm going to butcher the name, the Gueva Doces?
Is this for me?
Yeah.
No, I have not.
Okay, so it's spelled Guevedoces.
Okay.
They're a group of people in the Dominican Republic who apparently there's this small village there that has like an unusually high rate of intersex births. And I just randomly found it yesterday. And it was super fascinating because the implications of like how that affects their view on gender, like and sex, like they sort of perceive there as being three sexes because it's so prevalent there. It's like 1 in 90 male births there end up being like a specific type of intersex birth.
How do you spell it?
And
it is
GUEVA VEDOCES.
Okay.
CE.
So
CE, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I just wanted to clue you into that because I mean, the research was done in the 70s and it was almost purely like, it's almost purely medical oriented. So there wasn't necessarily a lot of like gender sociology studies done with it, but there was, I think a few years ago, some articles like discovered that this had happened like 40 years ago. And, they wrote some stuff about it. So just, I encourage anybody to read about them and like, just, it's super fascinating how they have a different like sort of concept of gender roles and, you know, sex roles and things like that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm
the
just
second
looking
point
at it now. Apparently, there was a lot written about it in 2015. There must have been
Yeah.
something came out. There was a BBC News. I'm seeing it in the Washington Post. This apparently, you know, at basically like a lot of the kids changed their name when they hit puberty. Fascinating.
Yeah, specifically, it's males that are born with like a weird testosterone byproduct deficiency that end up being sort of sex assigned as female at birth because they look female at birth, and then they sort of transform into a male like later on in life during puberty. And like the word is literally translated as eggs at 12 because eggs is like the colloquialism for testicles or whatever down there. And it's really fascinating. So I encourage anybody to read about it. The last point I wanted to make, Emma, I thought you had made a point on Twitter, I think it was today, how you think progressives need to pay more attention to Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And that's, I completely agree. I mean, I wanted to call in a few months ago to point out Summer Lee to you guys because when she had announced her candidacy, she was like immediately endorsed by, I think it was Cori Bush. I can't remember.
She's been endorsed by Bernie, by
Yeah.
she was initially recruited to the state legislature by DSA, you know, Sunrise, Justice Democrats,
Yeah.
all those things.
I mean, the thing is, Pennsylvania is really interesting. I mean, it's like nationally, it feels like everybody has the sense that it's gone more purple, but there's very specific pockets, especially, you know, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, obviously, that have undergone, you know, really sort of remarkable progressive renaissances. And, you know, Summer Lee, like, she's probably going to win the primary in my estimation, especially considering that the new district encompasses basically all of Pittsburgh. But people forget that, you know, her and her sister rep, which is my rep, Sarah Innamorato, these were DSA candidates that got elected in the blue wave back in 2018. And they not only did they get elected back in 2018, they both upset the Costa brothers, which were like this sort of long-standing, you know, establishment Democrat, you know, family sort of mini dynasty in Western Pennsylvania. And that trend has been happening. And then you have things like there's Starbucks stores in Pittsburgh are unionizing. It was announced about a month ago, which comes on the heels of one of the local coffee chains successfully unionizing on the heels of the sort of big news with the Buffalo Starbucks stores unionizing the months prior. So, yeah, I think you're 100% on, you know, in the right about that, that there are, even though it seems that Pennsylvania is going purple, there are some serious changes underway with progressive politics, especially in Western Pennsylvania.
Right. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, there's a lot of people really should, and also in terms of getting progressives elected on the state level in Pennsylvania is important too, given how aggressive the Pennsylvania GOP has been, and also obstructionist, despite the fact that Pennsylvania has a Democratic governor.
100%. But congratulations on the live show, guys. I watched the stream, and I'll see you guys in Boston.
All right,
Oh,
appreciate
awesome.
the call.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to seeing you. Thanks.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Let's go to the IMs. Between the 101 and the 5, Hunter has been hiding a weapon of mass destruction. From the file, does the nation's John Nichols look the same as Mick Mulvaney? A little bit.
Oh, don't do John like that.
Rube Goldberg.
No, I don't.
Love you, Sammers. You are not a boomer. I'm 64 and I'm barely a boomer, says Clower. Thank you.
What are you saying? You guys are nuts.
Oh.
When'd you add that?
Just let it go.
I far did. Somebody just sent me my name, Samuel Lincoln Cedar, born November 28th, 1960. Yeah, I know. I'm aware that it's on like a Wikipedia or some like place like that. That's why I was making a joke about it. Ray, Sam, as a follow-up to my IM yesterday about the new stadium funding in Buffalo. Do you remember the Jets West Side Stadium proposal next to the Javits Center in 2005? I do. I was living in North Jersey back then, so I heard a lot about it on WNYC. If my memory serves me right, the stadium was part of the New York's bid for the 2012 Summer Olympics. I think it fell apart after MSG lobbied against it because they think the new stadium will take away from their own event hosting business. The one funny result of that deal dying was the NFL draft, which for a long time was held at the theater at Madison Square Garden and became a traveling show. Different cities as an FU to MSG by the NFL. I didn't realize that, but I do remember, but I think there was also a lot of pushback. There was growing anti-Giuliani sentiment at that time. And I think that was a function of it too.
A football stadium down there seems like a nightmare.
It would have been insane.
Oh my
By
God.
the Javits Center? Is that what they said?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been insane.
Lunacy.
I mean, and then
build it
they
into
got
the
a
Hudson or
tax break to do it in Jersey and East Rutherford. The place is a freaking dump. But I mean, the idea that the MetLife was built recently and is this bad is hilarious. And they should have double the capital because 2 teams play there. But regardless,
Update on the story of New York State and I guess the Erie County, although it's coming from the state at the end of the day, let's be honest. Pouring $850 million into the new stadium in Buffalo
for the Bills.
You remember yesterday, Nomi had mentioned that there's a food service that is a national service. I can't remember the name off the top of my head now. Maybe you can just remind me of that.
Yeah.
That provides food for
I got it.
Provides food for all of the stadiums. And they love when a new stadium gets built because it means that they can update their facilities, they can sell more, they can, the way you you make money at these things is you increase your prices a little bit.
But the food service is called, it's a concessionaire, Delaware North.
Delaware
and
North,
the
right.
Senior vice president of said.
Hold on one second.
Okay, sorry.
Delaware North. And so what they do is when they get a new stadium is they increase their efficiency and they know where, the flow of people are going to be, and they're going to sell more hot dogs and, crap cakes or whatever the hell they're selling, and they're going to make more money. And it turns out, Governor Hochul, who had to sign off on this, obviously, she forgot one little detail that seems a little awkward now. Remind us, Emma, what was it that Governor Hochul forgot?
Her husband is a senior vice president and general counsel for Delaware North, the major food concessionaire at the Buffalo Bills' current Highmark Stadium. So they currently provide the food at the current stadium. I mean, Nomi said it doesn't need updating. It might. It does. I disagree with the concept of it being paid for by the taxpayer when you have an owner that's worth billions of dollars. But he was essentially saying, "I'm going to."
You're not.
Yeah.
You're not. It seems a little bit sexist to assume that just because Governor Hochul has a husband whose every bit of his material interest is tied up in the success of this company that is going to benefit mightily from this this huge tax investment in essentially allowing his company to make significantly more profits. You're not suggesting there's some type of relationship between that, are you?
That would be very self-hating of me as a woman.
Yes.
Self-hating feminism.
You got to support Hochul.
She's a woman.
Yeah.
She slays. But just to reiterate the point from yesterday, this is why we need more community-owned professional sports franchises, because the Pagulas are threatening the state of New York, and they have leverage here because Hochul and her husband want to financially benefit from it, but they have leverage because they were saying we're just going to go to Austin.
Right.
We'll be the third NFL team in Texas.
And this is always how it works. And Minnesota sports teams are familiar with this often happening.
St. Louis is unfortunately familiar with it as well.
Literally happened. Our buddy, the Starbucks boy with the Seattle Supersonics basketball team, they eventually shipped them to Oklahoma City when they had Kevin Durant as a rookie.
Yep, exactly. The Sonics went kaput, and but we've seen it in the NFL multiple times in the past 10 years. The San Diego Chargers moving to Los Angeles, the St. Louis Rams moving to Los Angeles as well. The Oakland Raiders, a staple of that community and of that city. Las Vegas is more.
That's crazy.
Las Vegas has way more money because of gambling and because of tourism. So here you go. So that again, I have my issues with how the Packers are run as an organization. Bradley and I were talking about that before the show today, but they are community owned, and it should be because these teams are really a fabric of the community and provide so much employment for people in those areas. More community owned franchises, and the tax giveaway to keep billionaires happy and basically giving into a hostage situation, plus the side hustle for the governor herself. It's sick.
Rob from Dedham. Hey crew, I got a fever, and the only prescription is more soundboard and trauma. I don't know if Matt or Bradley are running the soundboard, but we need more of that.
What are you two crazy bitches talking about?
Oh my God.
That one's gonna come in handy.
It was nice of him to not use any of the view sound underneath, like somebody that was a professional editor would have done, to make it sound like it's playing.
You don't have to be a professional editor. Just take a little room tone
Yeah.
from that stuff and just replicate it on your iMovie, and then just God.
But it does make it a lot easier to pull it for sound drops like this one.
You people are everything that you've come to hate. You know that?
He's so weird. Should we do this Google Fiber employees and Alphabet Company union buster? This is a recorded call from a meeting in Kansas City, Missouri. Employees for Google Fiber in Kansas City recorded their meeting with a corporate staffer trying to discourage them from unionizing. The staffer implied that they could lose their jobs if they try to unionize. My understanding is that that's illegal.
It is. But the lines are so blurred because they can pressure you in like all of these workarounds into not unionizing. So maybe they forgot that you can't just explicitly say, we'll retaliate against you.
And they also did the classic, a union is a third party, as opposed to essentially a state of being that workers enter into.
Like I said, the purpose of my visit out here is purely informational. When we get to the vote, whichever way you vote, we're still working together regardless of how it goes afterwards.
Yeah, that's already been decided.
Yeah, we've already all decided that we want a union. We wouldn't have signed cards if we weren't informed.
So what folks sometimes won't tell you that there's three parties involved. There's the employees. That's one party. One party is the company, management, right? And the other party is the union, which you can choose to have represent you or not.
We are the union.
Yeah, we are the union. I mean, we don't need the election. You guys could
Can you
just
pause it for a
recognize.
sec? I just love his insistence. No, you're not being properly informed. No, we're properly informed. We have all the information.
The tone here is
But wait, you're not being properly informed.
I like how they bring in this union buster. I like too, is got you got to bring in somebody who's got a little bit of an accent, right? Look, guys, there's three parties here. And,
I know he's cracking knuckles. If we had the video,
yeah, exactly. This is all we should say. This is all audio. There's three parties here. There's you guys, the good guys, and
Who
us,
we all love.
who we love, we really respect. We're all going to work together.
We're a
regardless of what
family.
happens,
We're a
unless of course
family.
we fire you.
We're a family.
There's the management, and then there's those people who would not give you a blanket in the Holocaust, as Howard Schultz would say. And that, of course, is the union. So, okay, you guys decide. All right, continue.
We are the union.
Yeah, we are the union. I mean, we don't need the election. You guys could just recognize the union.
You're absolutely correct. So in the world of what we'll call third-party vendors, your company can decide it's no longer a value proposition for them to work in there, right? And they could say, we're not going to do Google Fiber anymore.
Right.
As an example.
So are
you
you
willing to put that in writing?
Yeah. Are you saying that if we unionize, we're going to close?
No, not at all.
It sounds like you're insinuating.
Yeah. No. See, I don't know how you heard that. Right? Well,
I heard it. Yeah,
If you unionize, like, it's perfectly within the rights of the client, not BDS, to say, well, we're going to go look for another vendor.
Right.
BDS is the name of this contractor. I should say.
But it is illegal to threaten.
I'm not
action.
threatening anybody. That wasn't
Okay.
a threat. If you perceive that as a threat.
I'm just making sure you're aware.
No, and I understand that.
So what we're asking for here is why we as a collective group decided to go through this process is so that those decisions aren't being made above our heads.
This negotiation will happen whether we're talking to Google or whether you guys are talking to Google.
Bottom line, we would like these negotiations to have more of our input here from the bottom line. If we have to employ representation, we will. I mean, that's why we're all sitting here wearing red meeting. We love the product. We love our jobs.
Helping people.
We like helping people, that sort of thing. We're excited for our election. We're excited to be formally recognized, and we appreciate you guys' time.
There you go. You got to feel bad for that union buster who's got to go home. It's
Yeah.
a tough day at work today.
Simultaneously meeting a well-prepared group that's ready for everything he's going to try to pull, and he didn't seem like he'd been through that a whole lot.
No.
Like he seemed a little bit like, oh, I don't know how you guys would have. Whoa, are we watching? Are you on drugs? That you thought I
Right.
wasn't threatening
You
your
guys
jobs?
perceiving that I just said I gave a hypothetical that had nothing to do with this situation. It was just something that popped into my head. It's like that thing, like where someone's was I laughing? No, I was laughing about that joke I heard 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually that joke I heard 2 days ago.
It's on The Simpsons. It's really funny. It'd take too long to explain.
It is so awesome to hear workers get more educated as to their rights, to the extent that workers still have any rights under the National Labor Relations Act. But it
And actually educated, not like educated by the alphabet union buster.
Yeah, look, guys, let me explain to you what happens here, okay? Just, because there's a lot of misinformation. I'm sure you're aware of it. And the thing is that if you're going to join a union, I hope, did they do the blood thing yet with you? With the blood thing with the union? Oh, they didn't tell you about that? That's weird. Yeah, no, it's not like you could lose your job. It's just that, like, there's so much paperwork involved in this. We may close and just go somewhere else. But I didn't say that.
Remember all that stuff that BS about the Google hiring process? That this is the interview that you have to pass in order to get hired as a Google employee. Do you think they make their union busters go through that stuff too? Like, that lateral
Some
thinking,
technical
sort of like.
proficiency or something like that?
You didn't hear about this stuff?
No.
This was all the rage in like the mid 2000s. It's like the genius test that you have to pass in order to work for Google. And it's all like, like a trying like different shapes and which shape is the next one in the logical conclusion, like BSIQ stuff. But I'm glad that's gone out of
Yeah, maybe
fashion, I
the
guess.
union busters have a workaround.
Yeah, I bet they don't have to do that.
Oh, we mentioned this in the headline, but it's worth seeing. Donald Trump. Let me just say this about the Hunter Biden, laptop emails, whatnot. And there has been, I guess, a report by the New York Times and by the Washington Post recently saying that it was Hunter Biden's laptop. There were emails on there that were written by Hunter Biden. And
I mean, there were a lot of explicit images of him and like compromising messages from. I don't know, why is that news? I mean,
there were definitely people out there who were saying like this is Russian compromise or disinformation or whatnot.
insanity.
Nevertheless, the stuff with the Hunter Biden stuff was real. All of the stuff where there's no doubt in my mind that Hunter Biden was trading on his dad's name. I mean, there's never been a single, I don't think Hunter Biden even denied that. And the story of a fail son making more money than they should because they're trading on their father's name or some type of influence, that's as American pie as American pie, I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
And
again, I feel a little
not in
bad.
favor, but
I feel a little bad for him, though. He struggles.
He struggles, whatever. But, all of that, I guess my point about whatever is Joe Biden was not in office at that time. Joe Biden received no material benefit other than like, at least my son is making some money. Too bad he's going to snort it up his nose or wherever it is he's going to do with it. But never, ever has there been an implication that this has to do with Joe Biden. Other than that, this is his son, and his son is got some problems. And that gets obscured in the second order argument of like, nobody took this Hunter Biden stuff seriously enough. And the idea that it would have changed the outcome of the election should be perceived as a massive, massive liability with our media and our system. And in the same way that, James Comey coming out and saying that, Hillary Clinton, we're going to reopen the investigation 3 weeks before the election. And then, incidentally, she's cleared.
Right.
So this is all just sort of more second order stuff from the right wing. And here is Donald Trump trying to gin this up because it's getting some traction on the right.
One thing while I'm on your show, as long as Putin now is not exactly a fan of our country, let him explain because Chris Wallace wouldn't let me ask the question. Why did the mayor of Moscow's wife give the Bidens, both of them, $3.5 million for them? That's a lot of money. She gave him $3.5 million. So now I would think Putin would know the answer to that. I think he should release it. I think we should know that answer. Now, you won't get the answer from Ukraine, but why are they giving somebody who knows nothing about energy $187,000 a month plus a $3 million upfront payment? And I won't even talk about China because they haven't gone into Taiwan yet.
Right.
That'll be next. But why
pause it
did
for 1
the
second.
mayor-
Pause it 1 second. Understand again, none of this money went to Joe Biden, but I love the fact that he's saying like, look, Putin is clearly mad at America, not happy. Why doesn't he, and I say this as a former president of that same country, why doesn't he attack us by releasing information on Joe Biden and Hunter Biden? Now, the funny part about this is like, it sort of makes you think that, hey, maybe he doesn't have that information. Like, it's probably true. Putin is probably pretty upset with what's going on with America. And it probably would be very helpful for Putin to put out damning information that Joe Biden had been secretly paid by, Ukrainian energy company. I think that would be very helpful.
No,
to
but
Putin.
I heard it. I heard it on One American News, so it's got to be true. Why is Putin sitting on it?
Well, I mean, either Putin is in the pocket of the Biden administration, or he's just like, that would be a low blow, and I'm not going to do that.
I am above it.
I am above it.
Taiwan yet. That'll be next. But why did the mayor of Moscow's wife give the Biden family $3.5 million? Nobody wants to ask the question. And Chris Wallace, who's a total lightweight, unlike his father, who interviewed me for 60 Minutes, who was actually a good piece. Mike Wallace was great. He wants to be Mike Wallace, but he doesn't have the talent. But why is it that
And
the mayor
believe
of
me,
Moscow...
I understand what it is not to measure up to your father.
The mayor of Moscow's wife gave the Biden family $3.5 million. I think Putin now would be willing to probably give that answer. I'm sure he knows.
Why don't you give him a call?
But it
buddy?
does sort of beg the question: if that is the case, why doesn't Putin give that answer? I'm
That-
above it. That would be wrong.
That would be beneath the dignity of the office.
Bombing children. Okay.
Okay, I do that.
What is the implication? That, like, let's say it's all true, and like I glance at the fact check, and it seems like money going to different sorts of groups that some are loosely associated with Hunter and some are not. What is the implication, though, that this woman giving to the Biden family, as Trump says, which is not true? What is the implication? What does she want?
Oh, we got to do a lot of weird connections here. Then
I can't
to
think
make
of
sense
Also,
of that.
reminder: Joe Biden's not in office. He's more or less retired at that point. I don't, and this is also in 2012, right?
Yeah, like
So it's not like, I mean, everybody knew that Clinton was going to be was going to run for the presidency. Maybe
I've
they're
got it.
like,
It's so Biden would not be strong and retaliate when Putin would eventually invade Ukraine.
Well, that's
I mean, the Hunter, the
theory
energy
sounds
stuff,
better when you put that music behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the energy like money, that stuff like is more
real.
plausible. But
Yeah.
like this, I don't understand what this is. But thankfully, it's not censored.
This is more Donald Trump with John Solomon and Amanda Head. God, I remember when John Solomon was actually like, I think worked for like the AP or something like that, where everybody had to take him seriously as a reporter. And all the bloggers were like, this dude's a right winger. And everyone's like, he works for the AP. Now he's on America's Voice. Jesus. Where are they?
They're probably at
Is this,
Mar-a-Lago.
is this like Trump's like, oh, I built a mini Versailles.
Yeah. It is Florida Versailles.
Yep.
Oh my God. So freaking gross. I can't even imagine having to like,
The decoration there.
I
it's
just can't imagine having to live in a place like that.
I know, it's
honestly
bizarre.
feel like it would be like just the most punishing thing in the world.
Yep.
Here it is.
We would have never been talking. I'll give you an example, supply chain. You go to a store, they don't have bread. We're like a third world country. They don't have things. You go to buy something.
Pause it. But what? First of all,
you don't have bread.
there's not a single store in America that has run out of bread, except for occasionally people run out of bread. Like, oh, we had to run on our bread today. I went to the bagel shop at like 4 p.m, and they had already closed up. They were out of bagels. What's going on?
Maybe I'll get a bagel after this.
My local grocery store has been out of the Sunbelt granola bars for like 2 weeks now.
Wow.
When do you think the last time Donald Trump went in and bought a bag of bread?
I love the idea of Trump going into a grocery store, like the sliding doors. He looks up, he's like, "Oh, these are gonna open themselves." Okay, that's nice.
Yeah, it's literally Lucille Bluth meme come to life. Like it's a banana, Michael. What could it cost?
Can you imagine
$10?
him in his weird giant suits, walking down an aisle, like picking out some, like, oh, there's some Uncle Ben's rice. Good to see you still here.
Yep. Okay. I see the bread is. Oh, bread's here. This is quite
These
a deal.
apples very firm.
Quite a deal.
Very firm.
And here he goes, and he'll really get into what he's really talking about here.
Bread. We're like a third world country. They don't have things. You go to buy something at Tiffany. You go to buy something at a hardware store.
Wow, hardware store, Tiffany. Wait. You go to Tiffany's. Like,
No,
hey,
it's not even. It's Tiffany
full
to him.
Saturday.
Tiffany.
Because
You
I
go to
know Tiffany.
What? Like,
Not my daughter.
what is the least expensive thing you could probably buy at Tiffany?
I
Like a
think
bit-
a $100 like sterling silver necklace is my guess.
Like, I have no, or a hardware store, for instance.
Yeah, it's a full Saturday. We're gonna go to Tiffany's, and after that, I need to go pick up a laser level at the hardware store.
We're gonna go see if they have. I wanted to get like one of those 5/4 inch. They're out of it quite a
Yeah.
bit there, and also out of the $3,000 pen. I
Look.
wanted to buy at Tiffany.
We need 2 waypoints. We go to Saks Fifth Avenue, and then we'll make our way to Lowe's. Okay.
Tiffany, that name sounds familiar.
Go ahead, put them up, but don't run it yet. I love that. We stopped right there. Okay, go ahead.
Thing at a hardware store,
Hardware store?
high, low, they don't have product. They say, even me, when I order things like for furnishings for a building or something,
That I love that because you know how he was always talking about like the plumbing and how toilets don't flush anymore and like
Yeah.
dishwashers don't wash stuff. That's what he does all day. Is he figures out like what appliances to put in his buildings and just shops
Yes.
around and stuff. That's the most. That's
If he's buying wood and furniture in
the
bulk
marble.
or
Oh, look at that
whatever,
marble. That's nice.
that's yes. Like there's supply chain issues for the marble you're buying from Mar-a-Lago or for the ornate golden furniture that you're getting.
This is all because of Joe Biden. Keep going.
building or something, they say it's going to take 9 months to get it. Used to
Code
be
leaf.
like same day service. Supply chain, we never even heard the term. It wasn't like
Oh my
the
god.
system was working. The system's totally broken. Our system is broken.
Didn't you run on an anti like NAFTA, anti TPP thing? You were supposed to be man of the people, like bringing manufacturing back to the United States. Now you don't know what the supply chain is.
We never heard the word supply chain. Well, that may be one of the reasons why the supply chain is broken. We didn't even know it existed. We had no idea. There was no idea. This is also going to impact our supply chain. Now, the idea that Joe Biden screwed this up. Play this clip, the one that I gave you earlier, that Joe Biden screwed this up. Look at the shelves in this market. You will see completely empty.
Mm.
I mean, so much so that people are fighting.
We
over
are
it.
like a third world country. I brought that back from the primary, remember?
Here we go. This is local residents in Shanghai, as half of its 26 million residents.
Shanghai, Kentucky?
Exactly. Shanghai, Kentucky, have been are in lockdown because of the latest version of Omicron hitting in Shanghai. Look at that. Joe Biden responsible for all those empty shelves.
Heartland of America. Sad.
Can't believe this is happening in the U.S., the United States of China.
Oh my god.
Huge fights. All right. We are going to feel in some version or another. We're going to have more supply line issues. It's happening all around the world. But we never even heard the word supply line, which that's the way you do it. If you're not aware of the existence of something, it never becomes a problem. Like COVID. When we started saying COVID, what happened? People started getting it. Had we done what I said, don't say COVID, no one would have gotten it.
Good point.
Fail. We failed. Should we do this?
Oh, 10.
Yeah, let's do this one. And we should say we don't have Avery Jackson's the name of
The state legislature
mom, right?
is Elaine Gannon.
Find out, because I want to send people to her site.
Oh. But Elaine Gannon is the representative that had a trans child. Is that correct?
No, I don't think so. Is she a representative?
Gannon is the representative.
Okay.
Is the representative. And
I thought maybe there was some. Anyway, but let's. I won't say anything about that then, because that's unconfirmed.
All right, go ahead.
Wait, we should just preface it, right?
Yes. Her mom is sitting right next to her, and we don't know who that is, and I want to get a link to that.
Okay. So, but this clip is of Missouri State Senator Elaine Gannon basically interrogating a trans teenager named Avery Jackson with really invasive questions about their body. I'm not sure, is Avery a girl or a boy? I don't know. But in terms of how they identify girl, about her body. So let's just it's pretty uncomfortable. Just take a look.
You're in the ladies' room and then you realize somebody else is in there doesn't have has a male body instead of a female's body. I mean, it just causes some issues there.
No, it doesn't. It's, you should let people go to the bathroom. No one's there. You see them.
Well, they probably don't realize.
Yeah, exactly.
That's because you have those long hair and that's the,
right.
You're gonna go through the procedure.
You think we're going around forcing our genitalia in people's face? We're trying to go to the bathroom, and what you want to do is not let people do that. Your whole argument here is the fact that you don't want people to use a bathroom with no one. Yes, no one is looking at what genitals.
I was seriously just curious.
You're asking for genitals on public record about genitals, and if people would see that, how would anyone know? That's we have been coming for 7 years trying to help people understand, and I know this is off topic and it didn't mean anything by it.
Okay, pause it. I'm sorry. So I mean, first of all, then the way she's basically rolling her eyes and falling back in her chair as if, I mean, this girl's being ridiculous.
What's known
here,
as Karen mode.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. She's slipping into that. But the concept that you would ask a 14-year-old girl about her genitals in this very public way is so ridiculous. But it's also so revealing about how many of these conservatives, like their psychology, they're so sexually repressed themselves that they find like this stuff in their world fascinating and almost, I don't want to say titillating, but they're inappropriate because they have a very tentative connection or understanding of their own sexuality. And so they're projecting constantly with these questions.
We should say the woman who is saying who's sitting next to Avery is Avery's mom, Debbie Jackson, and she's you should go over and you can find her at _Debbie Jackson. And well, let's finish the other video and then we can go to that.
But she has like a explainer of that dispels some myths about
and yeah,
what
what
transitioning
happened
is.
with her child, and how she was situated when this happened.
Yeah, her daughter who transitioned from male to female when she was 4 years old.
I know this is off topic and it didn't mean anything by it, but that's the point. Kids aren't going around exposing themselves. Kids are wanting to play sports with their friends. That's what this bill is. And getting wrapped up in genitals in bathrooms gets us so far away from that, and it dehumanizes our children. My child is so much more than genitals. And that's what I need you to see. That's what every family who has come here, year after year, is begging you, demanding that you see. I don't know what your genitals are. I am not making an assumption, and I'm not willing to ask that question because it's highly inappropriate.
It's especially appropriate to ask it of a 14-year-old child.
It's just so, it shows that they're so blinded by their, like you say, like their own ignorance or titillation or fascination, that it really is about ignorance. Like, is it really more comforting for you as a state lawmaker, or anybody for that matter, to know what the genitals are of the person in a stall, in a closed stall
next to you? Like, is it really, like, is that the way that you're going to get some sense of security? If there are testicles in the stall next to me, or if there's a vagina in the stall next to me, one of those two things will determine how comfortable I am. Well, it determines, how quickly your stream is going to come. I'm sorry.
I mean, honestly, it's just so
so silly,
so bizarre. Just play the first minute of Debbie Jackson. This is Let's play the first minute of this video.
I'm the mom of a little girl called AJ, who was recently profiled in the Kansas City Star. As surprised as I was to find my family in the paper, I'm also incredibly proud. My daughter is 6 years old. She transitioned, which means she changed her outward appearance from male to female and started living full-time as her true gender when she was 4. Until that point, she was quite a rough and tumble little boy with a buzz cut and a shark tooth necklace. But when she was 3, she asked her dad and I if we could buy her a princess dress. We didn't buy the dress. We thought she might be going through a stage of liking bright or sparkly things and didn't want to waste money on something she would grow bored of in a week. But she kept asking, and I found out that she had a favorite princess dress she wore at daycare. What the heck, we thought, and we took her to the store to pick one out. Things didn't stop there. Over the next few months, she started to wear that dress every single minute that she was at home. And then she asked for more. Dresses, nightgowns, headbands, sparkly pink shoes, and eventually even girls' underwear. We allowed some of those things, but we drew the line at the undies. There were just some things we weren't comfortable with during this phase. But then I noticed her pushing down on her genitals a lot, and I asked her what was wrong. Not having those parts, I assumed she might have a rash and was itchy, but her answer shocked me. She said that they bothered her and were in the way. She wanted them gone. Thank God for Google, because I immediately jumped on the computer and typed in a search. 4-year-old boy says genitals should be gone. What came back was a very short list of results, but they all pointed to one thing. My child might be transgender. I had never even heard the word transgender before and really didn't know what to think. We made an appointment with our pediatrician. She recommended a child psychologist. But before we could even get an appointment, my daughter, then my 4-year-old son, said these words to me. Mom, you know I'm really a girl, right? I'm a girl on the inside. That moment changed my life. In the following months, she became more insistent. We saw the psychologist and an endocrinologist to make sure there wasn't a hidden medical issue. She became more determined to express herself by wearing those pink sparkly shoes to daycare. She wanted to go out for ice cream in a fairy dress and wings. Eventually, we couldn't hold her back. She was showing signs of depression and refused to leave the house dressed as a boy. The day I let her go to school in girl clothes, she was happier than I had seen in a very long time. The kids were great, and the teachers were awesome. But then the kids went home and told their parents, and they weren't so great after that. Adult bigotry had influenced them. We lost most of our friends and some of our family. We basically went into hiding for about a year while my daughter grew out her hair to look like the girl that she is. When we emerged again, it was with a very happy and confident daughter. When I tell our daughter's story, I hear the same uninformed comments over and over again, so I'd like to address a few of those now. 1, we are liberals pushing a gay agenda. Nope, sorry, I'm a conservative Southern Baptist Republican from Alabama. 2, we, or at least I, because they always blame the mom, wanted a girl, so we turned our child into one. Again, no, I desperately wanted boys. The idea of raising a girl in today's world scares me to death. I'd much rather be responsible for raising a good boy who knows how to treat girls well than to be responsible for raising a girl who might only be interested in dating bad boys. 3, kids have no idea what they want or who they are. My kid wants to be a dog. Should I let him? That's up to you, but I wouldn't. There's a profound difference between wanting to be something in imaginary play and in declaring who you are insistently, consistently, and persistently. Those are the 3 markers that set transgender children apart, and my daughter displayed all of them. 4, kids shouldn't have to learn about sex at such a young age. Well, I agree, so it's a good thing that being transgender has nothing to do with sex. Gender identity is strictly how a person views him or herself on the inside, and it is completely separate from who we are attracted to. 5, transgender people are perverts and shouldn't be in the bathroom with normal people. I don't know what you go into the bathroom to do, but I know what my daughter goes in there for, and it isn't to look around. is to go into a stall, lock the door, and pee where no one else can see her. Number 6, God hates transgender people. They are sinners and going to hell. My God taught us to love one another. Jesus sought out those who others rejected. Some people choose to embrace biblical verses that appear to say transgender people are being wrong. I choose to focus on verses like 1 Samuel 16:7, which says, "But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. My daughter is a girl in her heart. She knows it. God knows it. And that's good enough for me.
So I guess she delivered that about 8 years ago, I think, or so. And she is, I guess, has an outfit called Gender Inc. I'm not sure. I don't know really much about her. I just somehow on Twitter somehow got to that speech and that moment where she's with her daughter, and a state lawmaker wants to know, what genitals her daughter has.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, and the smug attitude when she leans back in her chair like that, and then watch that speech, right? It's just crazy to me. And Republicans say that the left is the one that's giving safe harbor
No.
to pedophiles. I mean, you're the one questioning a 14-year-old about their genitals.
Republicans
in
want
public,
to
and
have
that's traumatizing.
Yeah, Republicans want to have your child's genitals inspected before they go play soccer or basketball.
Yep.
All right, final call of the day. Wow, it's already 2:30. Call from an 847 area code. Sorry, folks, that is the final call of the day. 847, you are the final caller of the day.
Hey, is this me?
Yeah.
Hey, awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to call and describe an incident of corruption at the local level and what people can do about that my dad has been dealing with lately.
Sure.
So my dad is a
You're pressing some numbers on your phone, just so you know.
oh dear.
Yeah.
Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, my dad is a retired firefighter. And at the start of the pandemic, his department actually was buying out all the old guys, incidentally, all the guys who started their union about 20 years ago. And the village that he had worked for had brought in sometime in the last 5 years a new village manager with the purpose of slashing budgets, especially for public services like the fire department.
Mm.
And as it turns out, the gentleman they brought in had left his previous village that he had worked for after a hushed up sexual harassment scandal that involved the payouts of essentially hush money that had been covered up. And so these rumors had been going around, and my dad had FOIA'd, Freedom of Information Acted, a bunch of the communications between this guy and his alleged victim at his prior post, and as well as a bunch of village financial documents
Okay.
from the prior village.
Yeah.
And this town, or the village, had fought tooth and nail to refuse to release any of this stuff.
Yeah, but he FOIA'd it.
The release, yeah.
He got the release, and then what happened?
It was actually surprisingly very easy to get the. All he had to do was email his request to the state secretary, the Secretary of State's office. And incidentally, this is a Republican town in a Democratic state. We live in Illinois.
That probably
And
also
the,
enhances the
Secretary-
ability of that happening too, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And it was super easy to get a hold of the documents after that. The village had to send it over. This is all free to do.
Okay.
And
So is that the
it
end?
was,
Is that
all
the end of the
spelled out
story,
that,
or is that the end of the story, or where does it go? We gotta pick it up a little bit. But yes, it's good
yeah,
for
I'm
people.
sorry. So all of these documents that demonstrated that they had basically disguised all of the hush money payments as insurance payments on behalf of the city or
Interesting.
the village. And all of these documents are now going to a lawyer who is involved in a different unrelated lawsuits with this gentleman over village zoning,
Okay.
representing a number of residents in the village.
All right.
Who were
Well,
yeah.
look, I mean, I'm not sure that the broad story is necessarily relevant to everybody, but it's a good point to make that people have at their access to FOIAs on a state level, a local level, and I really appreciate the call.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks. All right, folks, that is the call-in portion of our program. I will read several more EMs, and we will go. Chardonnay Socialist. Holy crap, I love Katie Porter. She should chair every oversight committee. They kicked her off the financial services.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, let's get her on different committees in the oversight committee.
Honestly,
I can't stand how they just like pack all of the best progressives into the oversight committee so they can only be used as attack dogs for
Marketing.
marketing in the way that leadership wants.
Scooney, keep my Quip toothbrush out of your effing mouth. Speaking of crazy bitches, what's the latest with Dave's audience regarding his surrogacy situation? They've shut down like their chat.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't watch Dave live, but at least this morning his live chat was disabled for the stream.
Curious.
Wyoming Ryan, of course, it's a full-time job to handle medical paperwork. That's why the traditional American household is the best option. The woman stays out of workforce to do the paperwork after cleaning the bathroom and finishing the laundry. Perfect system. Skippy, please ask Mr. Renfro about the Franklin cover-up. I was in Nebraska, if I remember correctly. It's sort of actually like a Pizzagate. Now that I think about it, it was like one of the early Pizzagate things.
Or Epstein-y, right?
Yeah. Something like that. I can't remember. Barnacle Boy. Hey, Sam, it's my 30th birthday today, and I was hoping to give a shout out to you. I've listened to you for so long. I remember being in the car with my dad, and we would listen to Air America on the AM station. Between all your cameos on Adult Swim shows and the Majority Report, you've been an integral part of my upbringing as well as maintaining my sanity through these trying years. Love you and the crew so much. Left is best. That is very, very sweet.
Very sweet. And you got a shofar.
You're going to get a shofar, Barnacle Boy. That's awesome. Yeah. Also, it makes me feel like I am effing old. In fact, tomorrow is my 18th anniversary of starting to do radio broadcasting as a professional career. Wow. It is so weird. Like John Benjamin, who I've known for a long time, not someone I've particularly liked for any of that time, but I've known him for an extended period of time. And we now talk about things that happened in college. And every now and then we'll go, oh, Jesus Christ. That was over 30 years ago. That was 35 years ago. And then we just both like yell at each other how old we are. It's just,
I mean, it's amazing when you look at history.
It is just very weird to like start to reference things that were 30 years ago and you were an adult. But what are you going to do?
I'm now a decade from graduating master's, so I'm feeling that a little bit. It's a long ass time ago.
Rookie.
I'm a decade from graduating high school this year.
That is obnoxious.
I hope I can go to my high school reunion.
Rabbit from Boston. Hey, Sam and MR crew. Did you guys see the movie Don't Look Up? If so, what are your thoughts? As someone who sympathizes with the message of the film, the execution was super annoying. I get the point of the movie was to beat you over the head with the message in a hyperbolic manner, That doesn't automatically make it a good movie. If the
That's
point
what
of the
I've
movie
heard.
was
Yeah.
to convince people to do something about climate change, this is the most scoldly movie possible to do so.
That's what I've heard.
I don't know if this movie would be. I'm not sure I agree with your conclusion. I can just tell you as a comedy, it wasn't my favorite. As a satire, it wasn't my favorite.
I mean, they even
But
made
I'm glad
they
for
made a joke.
success.
Yeah. They made a joke about it, or Amy Schumer did in her monologue, just because like it got a bunch of Oscar nominations, but the critics didn't love it, right? So, but I mean, at the same time, I'm in favor of the message.
Tim Poop. Ola, keep up the good work, y'all. Hey, I'll speak other languages that aren't English. Just curious. Je ne parle pas français. Yo no hablo español. Pomputai nignoi.
What's that?
Lo midaber ivrit. I can say I don't speak. Let's say I said I don't speak Hebrew. I only speak Thai.
You did not say the French thing right. Do it again.
Je parle pas français.
Okay.
You know, or you
right?
could do well. I mean, I'm a little more fluent than you are. You can do the je ne parle pas français, but that's a little bit like canned. Everybody's going to know that you're not a French speaker when you do that.
You're doing it with the Canadian, the French Canadian.
I do French Canadian.
Yeah.
I my Spanish was a little bit better at one point, but no, I don't. I wish I did. I wish I did. I regret it beyond.
People who have the ability, like my mom's brother who passed, like could speak 5 languages, something like that. Just pick it up like that.
Yeah, but it's also just our education system fails. On that accord
no, but some
because-
people's minds just like soak that stuff up like a sponge. It really was not good for me.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
But the baseline of your average person living somewhere else is going to know more languages
Yes.
than we do in this country because, of course, we are so exceptional that we don't need to learn other languages. because-
Well, right. Even though we have, I'm sorry, to interject. Like in Finland, they all learn English and Swedish starting, I think, from a pretty young age because something like 5% of their population is native Swedish speaking. Here in the United States, what percentage of people? Over 20% Spanish speaking?
Yeah.
We should be a requirement. And I don't know
Absolutely.
any Spanish.
Bibi the Teach. You can go back to Socrates, who was ultimately killed for corrupting the youth of Athens by having them question authority. Dig low lefty. Sam, in light of the news of the defense budget increase, have you ever looked at the study Brown University did on the money spent during the entire U.S. occupation of Afghanistan? The 20 years we were there, $2.3 trillion was spent. The study found that over half that money was given to private contractors. As a vet, I can tell you that outsourcing of military functions to the private sector isn't just an Afghanistan thing. It applies to how the military as a whole operates now, from menial functions to such as logistics and pay to larger functions like maintenance and training. It's standard operating procedure now to let the private sector run the show. I don't need to tell you how problematic letting the private sector conduct war is, but this is dangerous on so many levels. We need to stop this by decreasing military spending as a whole. I wish there was the political will to do this. I couldn't agree more with everything you just said. Pajama Boy. Funny how Brianna Joy Gray isn't really covering this hearing much. I don't know why. I don't have a sense of what she's covering. Socialist salesman regarding Medicare for all and unions. Something I wish was asked of Gustavo at the live show was with unions that are pushing back because they assess that their negotiated insurance is a big reason for membership. Are there fears that if Medicare for all in New York or countrywide passes, that will you have a lot of people leaving unions? If so, how do we help those unions renegotiate to retain members? Well, I think the unions are afraid of it. I also think that there's probably some measure of corruption. You know, the way that this works, my understanding when you talk about big unions or corporations is the money comes in, it is set aside. It is not necessarily doled out, all of it. And so I think some of that money may get loose in there, but I think it's both. Avinu, that bulging pecs is only hindered by an underskirt. I don't even know what that means. Suki Miaz is another language. I don't know what that means. Depressed Canadian. Hey, Sam, to follow up on your comment that many women have spoken out in spite of online abuse about the unfairness with trans athletes born male competing against women, including Martina Navratilova, that many women have spoken out online. Okay, maybe have her on your show to discuss.
The famous tennis player?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't she reactionary? I don't want to have her on.
I mean, she's critical of allowing trans women to compete in women's sports. Why would we have her on?
Just for the debate, man.
Well, but she's not in women's sports anymore, is she? I mean, she's not
No,
playing.
she's
women's
older,
sports.
and also like the concept that we could get her on seems a little. I mean, I'm not saying maybe. I guess.
JB Davis, 65. Remember the Baltimore Colts? Bob Irsay ran for Indianapolis in the middle of the night in a snowstorm. Odd hominem. Sam, did you ever listen to the Hunter Biden interview on WTF? No. The least expensive thing you can buy at Tiffany's? Breakfast. 2 more. Amanda Head. Trump going to the hardware store has Ben Shapiro buying a single plank of wood at Home Depot energy. And the final IM of the day for Resto. The Army still uses that test with the triangles, apparently. I had to do it as part of the ASVAB intelligence test in 2015.
Whoa.
Folks, Emma will be here tomorrow. I will be back on Friday. Matt, Bradley, Emma, see you. Oh, good job today. See you, folks, tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you?